Let's go ahead and start. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Okay. I think we had finished Sadi and we were going to start Kinaya. So that would be page 72. I don't remember who read last time. Someone.
It was in there.
Sorry?
It was in there.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. تعريف الكناية والكناية هي ما استتر معناه والمجاز قبل أن يصير متعارفا بمنزلة الكناية. وحكم الكناية ثبوت الحكم بها عند وجود النية أو بدلالة الحال إذ لا بد له من دليل يزول به التردد ويترجح به بعض الوجوه. لهذا المعنى سمي دفع البينونة والتحريم كناية في باب الطلاق بمعنى التردد واستقرار المراد، لا أنه يعمل عمل الطلاق ويتفرع منه حكم الكنايات في حق عدم ولاية الرجعة.
Okay, so I don't remember what we covered last time. Did we go through Walat Raj'i and Ba'in and why? Did we explain why Sadi results in Raj'i and why Kinaya results in Ba'in?
Yes.
Okay. I teach this book to like 3 different groups of people. I have 3 different classes going on just this book alone. And so, like, what did I explain to them? At the same time, I'm teaching like other books with similar topics. Okay, so so Sarih, we said, is like the words are clear, we understand the intention and the meaning. Kinaya, we're like, wait, what do you mean by that? And so تعريف الكناية والكناية هي ما استتر معناه. So the meaning is hidden in some way, like we don't really understand the meaning. So we're gonna have to figure out what to do with that, but we'll talk about it in the والكناية. Then there's a second point, which is والمجاز قبل أن يصير متعارفا بمنزلة الكناية. That when we talk about حقيقة and majaz, in the last chapter was فصل في تعريف طريق الاستعارة. We were talking about actually before that, in the chapter of فصل في الحقيقة والمجاز, we talked about 3 types of حقيقة. We said there's حقيقة that's متعذرة, which is impracticable. There's حقيقة that's مهجورة, which is not used anymore, obsolete. And then there's حقيقة that's مستعملة, which is in use. And so we said that if the حقيقة is going to be متعذرة or it's going to be مهجورة, then we're going to go to the majaz. And the reason we go to the majaz is because obviously if the haqiqah is like impracticable, or if the haqiqah is like just that word is not used in that context anymore, then we're going to go to the majaz. But we also said, when we said that, we said, we used this word, we said, trying to find the word. Yeah. So we had this hukum. If you look at page 61, it says حكم النوع الثالث. This is the 3rd type, which is musta'mala. And musta'mala, we said it could have either meaning. It could be haqiqa or it could be majaz. And we went into this umumul majaz business that Imam Muhammad and Abu Yusuf have. Anyway, we said ولو كانت الحقيقة مستعملة فإن لم يكن لها مجاز متعارف. And so what we were saying was that there's like a majaz muta'araf, that it's a type of majaz that's well known, that's common, that's customary, that becomes The example would be calling, oh, that's a sick backpack over there, right? Like it's a very well-known, established muta'araf majaz. Before it became muta'araf, the first person who might have used that word and said, hey, your backpack is sick, the very first time that happened, somebody might have been like, what? And then they like, oh, I kind of like that. And then they used it, and then somebody else used it, somebody else used it. And at some point it became muta'araf, right? But it wasn't muta'araf to begin with. Like this word of sick is only a few years old. Certainly not older than you guys, and like 100% not older than me. That usage. So when the majaz, before it becomes muta'araf, because before it becomes like, so well known and recognizable, muta'araf, or like maybe the best way to like translate this is something that you can recognize. Okay, muta'araf, something that you can recognize. Because ta'aruf is to, get to know something. So muta'araf would be something that you can recognize. So the majaz before it becomes muta'araf is also kinaya, because if somebody says, hey, your backpack is sick, and you've never heard that word before because it's not common vocabulary, it's not common language, you're going to be going, hey, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by sick? So you're going to be asking about it. It's kind of kinaya, like what does sick mean? It's an independent point. Kinaya is just like something that has a hidden meaning, and then the majaz could be a type of kinaya if it's not very well known. وحكم الكناية ثبوت الحكم بها عند وجود النية أو بدلالة الحال. So the kinaya was implicit, unclear, type of hidden type of meaning. So you're wondering what it means. The husband says to the wife, go to your father's house. She's like, am I going because you're divorcing me? Am I going because we need a break from our argument? We're fighting too much. You're just telling me to go to my father's house because you need to, work from home and, need to get something done, or what's going on? Or even the man says, anti haramun. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? Am I haram for other men because I'm married to you? Or am I haram as in I'm prevented from doing something? Well, what am I prevented from doing? Or are you saying I'm haram for you, which would be a type of divorce, right? So a lot of different ways of having kinaya wording. And so you're just left wondering what's going on. So the only way you're going to actually take the kinaya and give it that meaning of divorce or something like that, I mean, in this example, is either you have wujudun niyya or you have dalalat al-hal. So either you ask the person, what did you mean by that? Oh, I meant divorce. Okay, that became clear. Or some sort of other circumstantial evidence. So we're talking about, we're having a discussion about, we're having an argument, we're talking about divorce, like I'm just ready to divorce you, and I'm ready to divorce you, da 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 da. You're haram. Okay, well, that's contextually pretty clear where that came from. Or I tell you to go to your father's house, and then you get there, and a few hours later, like someone's serving you divorce papers. Okay, well, became clear what's going on, right? The lawyer called you and started talking to you about that. Whatever. So the kinaya is only going to be established, like its ruling is only going to be established when you either find the intention or you find some other evidence for it. إذ لابد له من دليل يزول به التردد ويترجح به بعض الوجوه. Because you need the evidence. Without the evidence, you need the evidence in order to yazul bihi at-taraddud. What is taraddud?
Doubt.
Yeah, doubt. To remove the doubt, because you have a doubt. What does it mean? And then ويترجح به بعض الوجوه, and to prefer a meaning or an outcome. Which meaning applies here? ولهذا المعنى سمي لفظ البينونة والتحريم كناية في باب الطلاق. So this is why words like بينونة or tahrim the problem with I just explained the word with, so we just talked about okay. So the problem is ولهذا المعنى سمي لفظ البينونة والتحريم كناية في باب الطلاق. So the problem with the word with tahrim or the problem with baynuna, both of them are going to be kinaya. Why? Because I just explained the haram one. The haram could be you're haram for other people. You're haram for that man. You're haram as in you're haram. It's haram on you to leave the house. There could be many meanings of haram. Which meaning did you mean when you said you are haram? The sentence was incomplete. So you don't know what it means. You have a doubt. So there's taraddud because of that. And that's the kinaya part. Same thing with the word ba'in. If I say you are ba'in, what does that mean? Ba'in means to separate, right? So it could mean that when I say you are ba'in, I could mean your perspective and my perspective is ba'in. Like I think one thing, you think another thing. Okay, so we're ba'in in how we're thinking about something. Okay, well, it doesn't mean anything. Like it doesn't result in any hukum. It could be that you are ba'in as in you are ba'in from blame. Like no, there's no blame upon you. Okay, again, that's not talaq or anything. Or you are ba'in from me, like we are separated in marriage. You're ba'in from me in marriage. Okay, that would be kinaya talaq. So just saying someone is ba'in or someone is haram, those are kinaya words. Okay. لفظ البينونة والتحريم كناية في باب الطلاق لمعنى تردد because of the doubt that exists واستتار المراد and because the objective of the person who's saying it is like covered up. We don't know what they mean. لأنه يعمل عمل الطلاق. And the taraddud exists because there's many multiple meanings, not because they have anything to do with the word talaq. وتفرع منه حكم الكنايات في حق عدم ولاية الرجعة. And the hukum that's going to exist. So this is the other thing, right? I think we talked about this last time. I believe we talked about it. If not, we'll talk about it again. The basic idea being is like, wait a second. So if it's a kinaya word for talaq, why doesn't it just automatically result in talaq raj'i? Because according to the Hanafis, they would say that if I actually am separated from you and I have become haram or I've become haram for you, the only way we can do that is to make it an irrevocable divorce. If it was a revocable divorce, I could take you back. So if I'm telling you you're haram for me, it has to have been a irrevocable divorce. And that's why we're going to make it irrevocable. Okay, حكم الكناية في الحدود.
حكم الكناية في الحدود ولوجود معنى التردد في الكناية لا يقام بها العقوبات.
Okay, what does that mean? What's عقوبات? What's عقوبة?
Punishment.
Yep, punishment. So this is the ruling of kinaya when it comes to the hudud punishments, cutting off the hand, chopping off the head, whatever, like whatever capital punishment, etc. So ولوجود معنى التردد في الكناية, if you find taraddud in the kinaya because you have this doubt, you don't know for sure. See, with kinaya, you don't know for sure until you get the intention or you get some other evidence. Otherwise, it's going to stay as kinaya. It's going to stay as like you don't know what's going on. So if you find this doubt, لا يقام بها العقوبات. You cannot establish حد based on this. So if somebody said, oh, well, let's go ahead. حتى لو أقر
على نفسه في باب الزنا والسرقة لا يقام عليه الحد ما لم يذكر اللفظ الصريح.
Okay, so if somebody confesses in regarding zina or regarding theft, but they don't say صريح words. Like we're talking, like they say something like, let's say we're talking about theft. Okay, somebody stole a laptop from IOK. Okay, and so we're having this conversation. Yeah, I wonder who stole it. There's a security guard there. How did this happen? Camera, da 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 da. And then somebody sitting in the conversation said, you know what? I did something haram. I did something wrong. Did they say they stole the laptop? No, it's kind of unclear. I did something wrong. I did something unlawful. I did something I shouldn't have done. Even if you have like evidence, like even if you have like some circumstantial, somebody says like, oh, the laptop was stolen. Oh man, I don't know what to tell you. I did something wrong. You cannot establish had based on that because with had, the bar is very high, very, very high for how clear and explicit one needs to be. You're not going to move forward with the had. And so you can't just be like, oh yeah, they did it because this is not sarih, it's kinaya. You'd have to ask them, did you steal the laptop? And they would have to say, yes, I stole a laptop. ولهذا المعنى لا يقام.
ولهذا المعنى لا يقام الحد على أقرص بالإشارات.
Similarly, if someone is dumb and mute, and there's like, hey, who did this? And they do something and they say something in sign language. Then I don't mean the international proper sign language, right? Like there's the sign language which is a proper language. I'm not talking about that. This is talking about like somebody indicates says, aha, it goes like this. Right? They raise their hand. And they're like going like that. Yeah, that's not considered good enough. You need clear confession. ولو قذف
رجلا بالزنا فقال الآخر صدقت لا يجب الحد عليه لاحتمال التصديق له في غيره.
Okay, so if somebody says, if one person accuses another man, لو قذف رجلا بالزنا, so person A accuses person B of doing zina, and then person C says, yes, you're right. Okay, that's also not going to be taken because it's not clear enough. It could be he could have been affirming something else. He could have been saying you're right, or it's not that like you're right. You've told the truth. Like whatever, however you want to translate that. I just did like you're right because that'd be a more colloquial way to say it. But however they've attested that, because it's not clear enough, we cannot use that to establish the had. The had has a very high bar. Okay. So now we're going to switch topics completely into the chapter of mutaqabilat. This chapter of mutaqabilat, it's a long one. It's a long chapter, and it gets into, this is something that you guys studied in year 3. Not that long, it's 10 pages. You guys did this in year 3 as well from Sheikh Farhan's book in English. And here we're going to learn 4 words with regard to things that are clear. How clear is the text? And 4 words with regard to things that are unclear. So first we're going to do the 4 words, and they're called the opposites or the counterparts because they're mutaqabil to each other. So you have 4 words that have to do with clarity and 4 words that have to do with lack of clarity. So you can like say, oh, there's 4 in the other 4. Let's go ahead and like read this part and I'll explain it. المراد بالمتقابلات.
المراد بالمتقابلات تعنى بها الظاهر والنص والمفسر والمحكم مع ما يقابلها من الخفي والمشكل والمجمل والمتشابه. So these are the 8 words we're going to study. ظاهر, nas, mufassar, muhkam. And then the counterparts would be al-khafi, mushkil, mujmal, and mutashabih. And first we're going to focus on ظاهر and nas and mufassar and muhkam. So let me go ahead and explain this before we even get into the text. Sorry. Yeah, no. No, I was going to read that.
No, I'm going to explain it before we do it so that you have something in your head as we're reading it. So the zahir is that thing that when I say it, you already know the meaning. Like it's clear enough that you kind of understand what I mean. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there. But there's a possibility that you didn't completely understand what I meant. There's a possibility. There's ihtimal. There's some possibility you didn't understand, but it's clear. It's apparent. You can see the meaning. The nas is like the zahir in the sense that you understand the meaning, but there's one additional factor that the nas has, which makes you feel like you probably really did understand the meaning more clearly. And that factor is the reason I said the nas words was because that was the main purpose of my speech. With the wahid, I said something, but that might not have been the purpose of my speech. The nas, the thing that I said, it was the purpose of my speech. So now you have in your mind, oh wow, like this brings another level of clarity with it. The mufassar is that thing which is so clear. So it's like the wahid, it was apparent. It's also nas, it was the purpose of the speech. And it's so clear that it removes any doubt about what I was saying. Do you guys remember the word mufassar? We've used it once before.
We said it was when it was self-explained in the text.
Yeah, so it was used in the context of what? Mushtarak. We said mushtarak either is unexplained and we can't act on it, or it becomes mu'awwal, like where we've come up with an interpretation of it, or it's mufassar, as in it was explained by the speaker in a way that there's now no doubt about it. So if I told you to draw a spring that was mushtarak, then you guessed based on the context of the speech what I meant, that would have been mu'awwal. But if you asked me and I told you, that would have become mufassar, right? So the mufassar has now become so clear that the doubts are gone. So with wahid and nas, there's still some ihtimal that the meaning was a little bit different. With mufassar, the meaning has now become so clear that there's no doubt left remaining about it. And then muhkam is even clearer than that. Well, how can muhkam get clearer if the mufassar left no doubt?
Something related to
Sort of, yeah. I think you're on the right track. So the mufassar, Allah could have done the tafsir. So it could have still been Allah. The muhkam is, so the thing, mufassar can be explicit and clear and perfect in such a way that like there's no doubt left about it, but the mufassar can still be taken away. It can be abrogated. So Allah can say do X, and then Allah can say do Y instead, right? It was clear what you had to do, and then it changed, and Allah made it clear what you have to do now, right? But it changed. But with the muhkam, it cannot be abrogated. So when we say, for example, in the Quran, Inna Allaha Sami'un Basir or something like that, it's never going to change. Just muhkam. Okay.
Got it. So when you said it can't be abrogated, I was thinking along the lines of rulings, because there are some rulings where there's a difference between whether things have been abrogated or not, right? So where would that fall?
Where would those fall?
Some people say it's Mansukh, and others say it's not.
Yeah, so all of those things are going to be, it doesn't matter whether there's a difference of opinion or not. They're either zahid or they're nas or they're mufassar. Okay. Muhkam are those things that are never going to be abrogated, that cannot be abrogated.
So it's not to the ruling.
It's not quite related to if it's abrogated or not.
Okay.
Because, well, obviously if it's been abrogated, then it couldn't have been muhkam.
Yeah.
But even if it hasn't been abrogated, the point is not that. The point is, can it be abrogated? To say Allah is one, right? It can never be abrogated. That's muhkam. To say that, say that Allah expects ihsan, okay, it's muhkam, right? Like it can never be abrogated. So it's those types of things. Something that can never ever be abrogated. So that's why I said there's 4 levels of clarity. The wahid, which is the apparent meaning, nas, that was the reason you said it. Mufassar, it made it very clear, and muhkam is, it cannot be abrogated. So each one builds on the other. So the mufassar is also going to be like nas, and the muhkam is also going to be mufassar, and so on and so forth. That's how that's going to work. Okay. So for example, if I said, Afraz, I want you to leave the room. Is that wahid or nas or mufassar or muhkam?
Let's say wahid.
Wahid. Because let's say I say leave the room, okay, and there's a possibility you think you understand me, but there's a possibility you didn't understand me completely. Because what I meant was leave the room through the door, okay, but you jump out the window. Like, yeah, but What I meant was leave through the door. Like that was my meaning. So there's this possibility that you didn't understand me properly. Let me give you a better example in this one. So let's say I say, um, I went home from work yesterday. You won't believe what I saw when I got home. And then I explained something. You will not believe what I saw. The fact that I went home yesterday, was that Zahir or Nas?
I'd say Nas, but depending on how.
What's the point of my story? Why did I tell you all of that? I went home yesterday. Blah, 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 blah. Like, what was the whole point?
It's not probably something else.
It's about something else. It's about the thing I saw, right? That thing I saw, that's the Nas part. That's the purpose of my speech. The fact I went home was like sort of a irrelevant detail. Yeah. So that it's not the main purpose of the speech. So that's always going to be law. Because that wasn't like the purpose of the speech. Sometimes you can derive meaning from like things that you're saying, or even things that haven't been said. Like you can maybe make an assumption that I drove home. So I work in Long Beach and I live in Orange. I mean, it's possible I walked it, I took a bike, whatever. But we can make you can derive a lot of things from it, right? And we're gonna get into that when we do the next chapter. As you know, the chapter after that. فصل في متعلقات النصوص. We're going to learn about عبارة النص and إشارة النص and دلالة النص and اقتضاء النص. And we're going to learn how to derive all these different meanings from something simple that Allah says. Allah just says something, we start deriving all kinds of meanings from it. It's a fun part of the Sunnah. But the idea here is Zahir is the thing that like I happened to say, but Nas was the reason I said it. Okay. And then Mufassar is making it super clear, and Muhkam is the thing that cannot be abrogated. Okay, let's go ahead and start studying this. تعريف الظاهري.
تعريف الظاهري فالظاهر اسم لكل كلام ظهر المراد به السامع لنفس السماع.
Sorry, by the way, one more thing. If you look at the book here, the book has translations for all this. So it says Zahir is apparent, Nas is clear, Mufassir is explained, and Muhkam is unequivocal. Sometimes I just struggle with the English, so I don't really use the English much, but I mean, as Zahir apparent is probably a good translation, Nas clear, probably a good translation, Mufassir explained is a good translation. Unequivocal, let's just be on my vocabulary. Like,
I think even with all of these, it's still like, you can't read the English and understand what the difference is between apparent and clear. So like the way that you described it, which is, so I've noticed this through a lot of translations where they are translating literally, but particularly in this book, you can read the book, self-study, you're not going to still understand about it. But
yeah, and what's even worse than this is Ulum al-Hadith books, because they'll explain like the Mu'allaq Hadith is the suspended one or the hanging one. It's a hanging hadith.
But is there a reason they do that as opposed to like?
Because that's what it means linguistically.
As opposed to like the purpose of the book is to understand what it's saying. So
because they're trying to explain to you what the word means linguistically. Because if you understand that it's a suspended hadith or a mawquf hadith is a stopped hadith, like okay, what's a stopped hadith? Well, it's stopped before it reached the Prophet. It's being attributed to a Sahabi. Then they say, okay, the maqtu' hadith is the one. I don't even know how to translate that in English. Or they'll say like, what's that? Cut off. Got cut off before it reached the Sahabi, so you got cut off at Tabi'i. But I don't know if that's helpful. It doesn't. I guess it could be, right? Munqati' means that there's a cut in it, so I think that's helpful.
Yeah, because every time
there's a break in
if I have to read and I don't know the meaning of word or something, and like I find the translation, it's still not helpful. I have to basically go to student notes, or my own notes. But I was just wondering, like, as opposed to putting in, like, because you see just a lot of English books, a little bit of extra explanation, unless it doesn't have to be shut. Like, they're just explaining the word that you see. Yeah. So what I do when I'm translating is I'll explain, like, okay, the tadlis is like, okay, deception, but then I'll put a footnote. I'll be like, this is when a narrator drops their teacher's name or changes the name in a way that it looks like it's a different teacher. Like, I'll try and do that. But the thing is, like, it can be helpful because you're trying to figure out like
the English meaning, the linguistic meaning, so it can be helpful for that. But the khafi is obscure, mushkil is problematic, mujmal is unclear, and mutashabih is ambiguous. But unclear versus ambiguous, like, okay. And then it gets worse because Hashim Kamali translated Zahir, Nas, Mufassir, and Muhkam as manifest, explicit, unequivocal, and perspicuous. And by the way, so for Hashim Kamali, the Mufassar is unequivocal. And for this translator, the Muhkam is unequivocal. And words like perspicuous, like, I have no idea what that means in English. It's way easier for me to understand Arabic. Then Hashim Kamali translates khafi as obscure, mushkil is difficult, mujmal is ambivalent, and mutashabih is intricate. Intricate? That's very hard for me. So yeah, these are interesting.
Or is it fair to say, I'm just trying to understand, like, it's for us as common sense, because we're not native speakers, like you would do a little bit more to explain this. Is it that the people translating this are also technically more native to the language, so they don't necessarily understand the disconnect?
No, I think they're trying to give the term an English equivalent. It's no different than when we say, what do we say? Because I'm not very good with these terms. How do you say mubtada and khabar in English? Subject and predicate. Okay.
They say nominative, yeah.
Yeah, and then we have like nominal sentences or nominative sentences, whatever it is, right? Masdar we say is like a verbal noun or something like that.
Like none of those are really helpful when you're studying
And I'm like,
English.
and then like majroor is like jussive, and like nasb is mansub is accusative, and marfu is what, nominative or something? Yeah. So I'm like, wow, this is very hard for me. Like, can you just call it marfu, majroor, mansub? Like, because learning another set of terms in English, I just don't find that helpful. Like, might as well call it, because it's all meaningless the first time you're learning. Like, well, it's like, it's X, Y, Z, right? So whether you call it marfu or nominative, mansub or accusative, and then majroor or jussive, it's all the same to me. Like, it's all like foreign in a way, right? So I don't find that helpful, but they do try and like have English equivalents just so that there's an equivalent. Verbal noun, yeah, I mean, maybe if I knew English grammar well, I would know what a verbal noun is, but I don't. So for me, it's all masdar is masdar. Okay, go ahead. تعريف الظاهر.
تعريف الظاهر فالظاهر اسم لكل كلام ظهر المراد به السامع بنفس السماع من غير تأمل.
Okay, so the ظاهر is the one. اسم لكل كلام. Okay, any speech. ظهر المراد به للسامع, and the meaning is apparent to you. بنفس السماع, just by listening to it, you know what it means. من غير تأمل, without having to think about it. You don't have to be like, oh, what does that mean? It's like, no, the meaning's clear. You know what it means. تعريف النص.
تعريف النص والنص راسخ الكلام.
Yeah, so what we're saying is the nas is that for which the statement was made in the first place. It was the reason for the statement. It was the reason for why I said the thing that I said. So now you know. So now that you know that it is the purpose behind the statement, the clarity is assumed to be greater. So, for example, if I make a statement independently, it might be zahir. But if there's a question that was being asked and I gave an answer, you might now understand the statement better because you now know it's the answer to a question. So you will have better understanding of what it means.
So how do you literally translate the sentence? So when you say so it's what clarifies the speech that came before it, or
لأجله?
Yeah, where's the answer?
The لأجله means the purpose of it. You know, you have مفعول به, مفعول مطلق, مفعول, all the different, the 5 different maf'uls. So one of them is called مفعول له or مفعول لأجله. You familiar with that one? So it's مفعول, like it's the reason for the thing. أذهب إلى المسجد لأصلي. لأصلي, that's a مفعول لأجله, right? This is the reason for the thing that I'm doing.
I'm trying to think of an example. So when we have like the ajal in musamma, doesn't it usually translate to fixed something?
The word ajal has many meanings.
Okay.
Yeah. So here
It's
we're
just
talking.
another meaning. It is a meaning of it, but it's just
Yeah. So it has many meanings, and one of the meanings is the reason for something, the purpose for it.
مثال الظاهر والنص ومثاله في قوله تعالى وأحل الله البيع وحرم الربا فالآية سيقت لبيان التفريقة بين البيع والربا ردا لمن
Again, فالآية سيقت.
فالآية سيقت لبيان التفريقة
No.
تفريقة
Mm-hmm.
بين البيع والربا ردا لما ادعاه الكفار من التسوية بينهما حيث قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وقد علم حل البيع وحرمة الربا بنفس السماع فصار ذلك نصا في التفرقة ظاهرا في حل البيع وحرمة الربا.
Okay, so Allah says in the Quran, الذين يأكلون الربا لا يقومون إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس. So Allah says those who take riba, they will not stand except like the way that someone who's been afflicted by shaitan stands. And then, so like basically don't take riba, it's a bad thing. Okay, and then Allah says, ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا. That's because they say that sales and riba are the same. It's like the same. Like you're making profit. I sold something, I made money on it. I lent someone money and I made money on it. Like money, what's the big deal? It's the same thing. And then Allah explains, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا. That Allah has made bay' halal and riba haram. Okay. So what we say is, how do we know what the purpose of this statement is? وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا. What is the main purpose of making this statement? To show that they're different things. The main point wasn't to say that, even though if I said this by itself, أحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. It sounds like what I'm trying to say is Allah has made transactions halal, sales halal, and riba haram, right? That's what it sounds like. Like that's the zahir meaning. It would have been like, even seems like the nas meaning. I'm saying it by itself, right? Seems like the nas meaning, but that's actually not the nas, because we have a context before that where we get ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا. They say that the two are the same. So Allah's response isn't, the main point isn't, oh, this is halal, this is haram. The main point is they are different. Allah wants to show that difference. فَالْآيَةُ سِيقَتْ لِبَيَانِ التَّفْرِقَةِ. It wants to differentiate between the two and show that they are different. بين البيع والربا. ردا, as a refutation to, as a response to, لِمَا ادَّعَاهُ الْكُفَّارُ مِنَ التَّسْوِيَةِ بَيْنَهُمَا, of the kuffar wanting to make the two the same. حيث قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وقد علم حل البيع وحرمة الربا بنفس السمع. We also learn from this speech that bay' is halal and riba is haram from the same speech. Okay. So we're learning two things. We're learning that they're different, and we're learning that one is halal and one is haram. Okay, those are the two things that we're learning. There's many other things we're learning, but those are at least two things. As far as ذلك نصا في التفرقة, to differentiate between the two, that is the nas, because that was the point of the answer. ظاهرا في حل البيع وحرمة الربا. It's ظاهir for saying this is halal, this is haram. Nas for saying the two are different. Okay. Now the question becomes, and this is what I always want you guys to think about: who cares? Why are we learning this? Why is this relevant? So one is wahid, the other one is nas. So what? Why are we sitting here like spending time on this? Like we're almost 45 minutes into class. We've learned the meaning of wahid and nas. Why have we spent so much time on this? We also did kinayah. Anyway, what's the point?
It's a better differentiate understanding intent.
So what are you going to do differently? If the words were zahir versus the words were nas, how is that going to make you a better Muslim or a better faqih or like better student of knowledge? Like so what?
Doesn't it give you a sense of hierarchy or the importance and priorities?
Okay.
And then the rulings probably aren't. Could be impacted, but probably not.
I mean, clearly there's a sense of priority being established. Yeah, so you have a point there, zahir versus nas versus mufassir versus muhkam. But how does that priority translate into anything practical or useful? The thing that I want you guys to think of, the thing that I want you guys to develop a habit of is when you're learning something, whether it's like mawquf and maqtu' and mursal and all of this stuff, or you're learning zahir and nas and mufassir and muhkam, whatever it is, whichever subject, whichever class you're in, whoever the teacher might be, whatever the book might be, whatever the reason might be, even if it's the Quran, and the Quran's trying to teach you something, you're like, why is the Quran doing this? Why does Allah want me to know the difference between these two? What's the point? I want you to think to yourself, why? There's an extra word that Allah put in the Quran over here. It can't just be extra. There's a chapter in this book. Maybe that chapter is not important, okay? Somebody thought it was important. Why did they think it was important? So with the Quran, there's no doubt. When you study something in the Quran, and there's an extra word in an ayah, and you're like, I don't know what this word is doing here. You know there's a purpose for the word. So your job is to go seek it. Go figure out what that word means. Okay, go ask your teachers, go look up books of tafsir, do whatever it takes, figure it out. You guys are here students of knowledge studying this book. Okay, maybe it's a human written book, I get it. It's a human created subject, I get it. But somebody thought it was important. So you should at least know why they thought it was important, even if you disagree. You should at least know why they think it's important, even if you disagree. And also, like, maybe you haven't yet developed the full skill to disagree with them, right? So I'm not suggesting that you should start formulating opinions that you maybe don't have the right to have, but you can start formulating some thoughts, right, in your own head and ask teachers about them. So why are we studying this? Some of the other subjects I hope were clear, like sarih and kinaya. There were rulings, right? We studied some ruling with sarih and some ruling with kinaya, things like that. But why? What's the point of zahir versus nas? Go to page 76 for a second. Read وحكم الظاهر والنص.
وحكم الظاهر والنص وجوب العمل بهما عمين كان أو خصين مع احتمال إرادة الغير وذلك بمنزلة المجاز مع الحقيقة.
Okay, so the حكم of ظاهر النص is that you have to act upon both of them. وجوب العمل بهما عمين كان أو خاصين, whether it's عام or خاص, doesn't really matter. مع احتمال إرادة الغير, while knowing that there's a possibility that you're wrong, right? Remember I said, leave the room and you jumped out the window when I wanted you to walk out the door? Okay, so there was a possibility you were off a little bit because things aren't 100% clear. وذلك بمنزلة المجاز مع الحقيقة, just like we act on majaz and haqiqah. But anyway, the point is you do wujub al-amal. You act upon both of them. So if we're going to act upon both of them, and we're giving this as hukm al-zahir one nas, why are we differentiating between zahir and nas? Why didn't we just combine them into one category? Nobody has an answer? Okay, the reason that we want to differentiate between zahir and nas, and it may not be apparent at this point, but it's going to become apparent on page 77. The reason that we want to differentiate between the two, but I want you to be asking these questions when we're studying, not necessarily when we get to it, it'll become apparent, but I want you to be thinking about it. It's like, why did we differentiate? The reason we differentiate is if you have two pieces of evidence, one's coming from one verse of the Quran and the other one is coming from a different verse in the Quran, and one of them is zahir, and one of them is nas, and they're conflicting with each other. Which one are you going to take?
Nas.
the nas, because it wasn't actually a conflict, it was your own misunderstanding. It was an apparent conflict, an apparent contradiction, and you resolved it by doing with the nas over the law. Okay, so it's a way that you're going to prefer the nas. If the point of a sentence is to make a particular statement, like I said, hey, when I went home yesterday from work, you will not believe what I saw, right? You make the assumption that I drove home yesterday. But then like later on, I tell you, by the way, I took my bicycle from work to home yesterday. That is going to be given preference. That's going to be given preference, right? So the nas is always going to be preferred over the law when you find conflicting evidence, and that's what we're trying to differentiate between the two. Okay, so the example that we just did, إنما البيع مثل الربا ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. Okay, fine. We explained what the law was, what the nas was, but there was no conflict. There's no problem. The example we're using. There's a zahir to the verse and there's a nas to the verse, but there was no conflict. So that problem didn't exist. Okay, it's when you find a zahir and nas that seem to disagree that you have to resolve the problem. So, yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about zahir and nas and reconciling between conflicts, right?
Mhm.
Are you talking about in the totality of evidences? So you have, like you said, multiple verses or hadith from different
Correct.
verses, so you have to do it.
Yeah.
Because then what I'm trying to understand between like haqiqa and majaz, for example,
Yep.
is you could make an argument that some of the misused verses, for example, about the killing believers and stuff that the Orientalists use, right?
Some of it's what?
Like some of the verses the Orientalists talk about, like where we find them, etc. And like
Yeah.
Exactly. We have so many plethora of conflicting. I was saying conflicting is obviously you read the same.
Within the context, yeah,
in the context, it's different, but there will, obviously people who can hijack it or claim like this is my literal interpretation.
Yep.
So from a haqiqa and majaz perspective, you could make a case that like, okay, maybe it's not entirely clear, but then when you bring this into context, which is, in light of all of the different evidences, I guess how do you reconcile between those two things? Where you always see haqiqa and majaz in the context of everything else, so you can't ever just look at something alone. Or are there places where they do look at it in solidarity?
So every single word that we're going to read in the Quran, we're going to be trying to classify it. Every single ism, for example, we're going to be trying to figure out, is it am or khas? Is it mushtarak? Does it need to be, is it mujmal? Is it mu'awwal? Is it mufassar? Is that particular phrase being stated zahir or nas or mufassar or muhkam? And that helps us establish the certainty of the understanding that we have. What is the understanding? What's the scope of the understanding? How broad is it? Does this apply to one Muslim, all Muslims, some Muslims? Is it applying to, and that's the key of the verse that you're talking about. Is it applying to every mushrik in the world? Is it applying to every non-Muslim in the world? Or is it referring to a specific?
Yeah.
So not understanding am and khas is going to mess you up. Right? And so that's not a haqiqa majaz situation, but also you're trying to understand, is it haqiqa, is it majaz, right? Yeah. Every single word in the Quran, is it haqiqa, is it majaz? You're trying to figure that out. So these are all usul al-fiqh, you can think of as a broader subject in a way than usul al-tafsir. Usul al-tafsir is like a branch of usul al-fiqh in a way. But usul al-tafsir also has some other things in it. Is this verse Makki or Madani, and all these other things. Is this the end of the ayah? Can we stop here? And there's a lot of other concepts that come into tafsir. But a good chunk of usul al-tafsir, when you open up books of usul al-tafsir, you're like, wait, this is haqiqa and majaz and am and khas. Like, I've done this before. Because it's just the same thing. In fact, even it's interesting, like there's overlapping concepts that exist across even ulum al-hadith and usul al-tafsir as well. There's a lot of them. Like, when we look at the tafsir of a verse, can we take the Israeliyat or not take Israeliyat? There's a lot of different things that overlap. But fundamentally, what you're trying to do is try to understand what it means. And all of these tools like haqiqa and majaz and all this stuff is just about meaning. The zahir and nas, the only reason we might care about the zahir and nas is if we find that Allah is saying something in a nas fashion here and the same thing in a zahir fashion there, and the two are apparently contradictory, we're going to prefer the nas over the zahir. That's it. Yeah. So this example of وَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا, it's not practically useful. It's only useful in the sense of, let me teach you zahir and nas. See, this verse is zahir in this meaning and nas in this meaning. That's it. It doesn't contradict with anything else. It doesn't have any practical implication. It's just a tool to explain to you this is wahid and it's nas. To like show you, hey, you thought did you think it was nas in this meaning? No, 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 it's not. It's wahid in that meaning because it's an answer to a question. If it wasn't an answer to a question, you would have thought it's nas in a different meaning. That's all it is.
That makes sense. But as with everything, right? Like everyone can make their own case, and there could be differences, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, some of these things are like there's going to be parts of the Quran and someone's going to argue it's haqiqah and someone else is going to argue it's majaz.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm saying between that.
But at least what you have, by the way, at least so what we're doing is the following, right? We're learning some terminology, and like for me, like the terminology is not the most important part, but the terminology is useful because let's say you and I sit down and we want to get into a debate about this word in the Quran. Is it haqiqah? Is it majaz? At least we have, or is it zahir? Is it nas? Okay. At least we have a common vocabulary. We have a common vocabulary. You're going to argue it's nas. I'm going to argue no, it's zahir. Okay, great. We can argue back and forth, but we don't have to, we have a vocabulary. We don't have to like go explain like, oh, did Allah mean this? Did Allah mean? It's easy to talk. That's one thing. Secondly, then the question becomes, do we agree? Do we not agree? Right? That's a different issue. But what we're learning is, okay, this is what zahir means, this is what nas means. This is a ruling of zahir, this is a ruling of nas. Then we can argue about what is zahir, what is nas. That's a different thing.
Yeah, because it's just like in light of things like this is my personal approach to this. Has probably come across in our fifth discussion. Mm-hmm. Wherever there is a disagreement, that's fairly prominent. But it's like it wasn't, like clear enough for it to be so important that it's obviously not going to be like a pillar of our faith or something.
It's never going to be anything that's going to have a significant enough difference of opinion, for example, across madhahib or schools or whatever, couldn't have been significant enough because if it was, Allah would have made it clear. Allah designed this deen for us. He would not have left something out that would be unclear for us and leave us in a loop. The Quran came as guidance, and it's not just huda, it's bayan, it's clear guidance in Arabic, in a language that we understand. And so there's no way Allah is going to leave us lost at all. Yeah.
And that's where I think like a lot of people are approaching purely logically, which you can't entirely, but it should be able to be understood from a very rational perspective, at least within your limitation.
The usul of the religion are always going to be clear.
Yeah. It's where it's just like in that context, I mean with kind of the conservative majority, even if I might personally sometimes have conviction in the minority opinion, just because it's like it wasn't clear enough, and in this case, this is what the vast majority.
Sure.
Yeah. But is that like a fair? My question, I guess, more so is that like a fair way to approach things, or is it really just a personal preference?
No, I think it's a fair way to approach things, and I think the more you learn and the more you are like in and out, and like you just have like you're able to navigate the usul, the language, that like, and you've been through dozens of books of usul, and you've read half a dozen tafsirs, and you once you've like gained a certain level of understanding, you can be a bit more comfortable even in going with the minority because you're going, well, what you start learning a lot is when you read the books, and when you read the books in order. So you say, okay, for example, I'm going to pick up Zahir al-Riwaya and read the books of Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani. Then I'm going to read like after that, I'm going to read like a book that came after that, I don't know, Huduri or something. Then I'm going to read like something else that came after that. I'm going to read something else. And you read in sequence. What you start finding is there was an idea that was not developed early on, and then somebody latched onto it, and then somebody else just copy pasted it. Because if you look at it, like what is Hidayah? Hidayah is Huduri and Jami' al-Saghir cut and pasted with words added, but it's built on Huduri, right? You look at Ikhtiyar and what it's built on. It's built on, like, you look at all these books, they're all built on earlier books. So what happens is the earlier back you go, the more you find things were not that well defined. But once things start becoming defined, they become more and more and more and more defined. Nur al-Idah is like the most defined book, period, right? People start adding all kinds of stuff to it that like you will never find at the beginning of time. So you start getting a little more perspective of what things were like early on. And things are a little bit more flexible early to get more defined as time goes on. And so once you read a lot of the early books, you get more comfortable in following the early people. Like for me, I have a strong preference to go with the perspective of the mutaqaddimin than the mutaakhirin. Like I prefer the books of the early people than the later people, personally. وكذلك قوله تعالى
وكذلك قوله تعالى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاث ورباع سيق الكلام لبيان العدد وقد علم الإطلاق والإجازة بنفس السماع فصار ذلك ظاهرا في حق الإطلاق نصا في بيان العدد.
Okay. Someone, can you explain that? So this says, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Marry of the women who are pleasing to you, 2 or 3 or 4. So this is سيق الكلام لبيان العدد وقد علم الإطلاق والإجازة بنفس السماع. Okay, this is the part I want you to explain. فصار ذلك ظاهرا في حق الإطلاق نصا في بيان العدد.
So he's saying that فصار ذلك ظاهرا في حق الإطلاق. So the right of إطلاق, like meaning divorce, becomes clear in the Zahir sense.
This is not divorce. إطلاق.
Oh, إطلاق.
This is not طلاق. What does إطلاق mean?
Is this
Unrestricted.
Sorry?
Unrestricted.
Unrestricted, yeah. The same word as mutlaq, yeah.
Yeah, so it becomes unrestricted, and then it is nas, meaning the purpose of it is the clarification of the number.
And what is the clarification of the number?
Two, 3, or 4.
2, 3, or 4. And then Allah continues when khiftum, so you can also marry one, right? You're also allowed to marry one. Well, this part only mentions 2, 3, and 4, but you can also have one wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this verse is nas for bayan al-adad, but what does it mean? It's zahir for haqq al-itlaq. What does that mean?
Is it just saying like nikah in the general sense?
Nikah in a general sense, okay? Nikah in a general sense. So was the purpose of this verse to tell us that nikah is allowed? Because the zahir of the verse is, yes, it's allowed, because Allah says you could do 2 or 3 or 4, or 1, right? Well, technically it says 2 or 3 or 4, and if you're scared that you can't take care of them, then 1. So that's technically what the verse says. But anyway,
is that actually the main perspective?
that is not the prevalent interpretation, but some people have that interpretation. For some people, they say the preference is you do 2, 3, or 4, and if you're not able to, then you do 1.
Because of the order.
Yeah.
Verse.
Yeah, because Allah doesn't say 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
I understand. I have empathy for the perspective, right? Because that's why I said technically it does say do 2, 3, or 4, and then if you can't, then do 1, right? So I that's not my interpretation, but I understand why people have that interpretation. So there's groups of people who say yes, it's better to do 2, 3, or 4, and if you can't, then you do 1. Again, not my personal view. I think 1 is good. Alhamdulillah. I hope 1 is enough. Inshallah, 1 is enough for me. Alhamdulillah. So what we're saying is this verse came, and the verse, you can interpret the verse to say you can marry a woman, and that's one but that's not the point of the verse, because we already know nikah is halal, right?
Mm-hmm.
We already know that because Allah says in the Quran, وَحِلَّ لَكُم مَّا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكُمْ وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ, that page, that verse ends with وَحِلَّ لَكُم مَّا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكُمْ. Because Allah, it starts off before that. حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ وَبَنَاتُكُمْ وَأَخْوَاتُكُمْ وَخَالَاتُكُمْ, right? These are the people who are haram for you. You can't marry your moms and your sisters and this and that and siblings, etc., etc. And then it continues on the next page. And then what does Allah end with? He says, these are the people that are haram, these are the people that are haram, these are the people that are haram. وَأُحِلَّ لَكُم مَّا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكُمْ. And then anyone other than these people are halal for you. So we already know that who we can marry, we already know we can marry. So we didn't need another verse that tells us that you can get married, but it's zahir in the fact that you can get married. It's nas in the fact that you can do 2, 3, or 4, or 1, right? Again, there's no conflict. We're just using this as an example to explain zahir and nas. وَكَذَلِكَ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى. Actually, should we take a break? Should we take a break? We'll take a break in a bit. Let's finish this idea.
وكذلك قوله تعالى لا جناح عليكم إن طلقتم النساء ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة نص في حكم من لم يسمى لها المهر وظاهر في استبدال الزوج بالطلاق وإشارة إلى أن النكاح بدون ذكر المهر يصح.
Okay, so this is in the Quran. لا جناح عليكم إن طلقتم النساء ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة. لا جناح عليكم, there's no blame upon you إن طلقتم النساء, if you divorce a woman, ما لم تمسوهن, if you've not touched her, like meaning you haven't, could have two meanings, right? Either you haven't had intimacy, like you haven't had intimacy with her, and we know from a fiqh perspective you haven't had khalwa with her, because khalwa would be considered equivalent. أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة, and or you have not stipulated for them mahr, right? You have not stipulated mahr for them. So this verse, نص في حكم من لم يسمى لها المهر والظاهر في استداد الزوج بالطلاق. It's a ظاهر that the husband has the exclusive authority or the exclusive autonomy to issue divorce. The husband issues the divorce. So the ظاهر meaning, but we already know that from other places. We already know that the husband can issue the divorce. We don't need this one. And so, yeah, the husband can issue the divorce, but the verse is nas about the hukum for the one where no mahar was stipulated in advance. Okay, the hukum is about the woman who wasn't touched and whose mahar was not stipulated in advance. By the way, there's a second part to this which says وإشارة إلى أن النكاح بدون ذكر المهر يصح. We haven't yet learned إشارة nas. We're only talking about like the ظاهر and the nas. In 2 chapters from now, we're going to learn something called إشارة. إشارة means it's an indication towards the fact. Look, if there's a hukum about someone who got married without stipulating dowry, then you can derive from that the fact that you can get married without stipulating dowry, and the nikah will be valid, right? So from an ishara perspective, we also learn from this verse that you can have a valid marriage without stipulating the mahar in advance. Okay, so many things you could derive from these verses. You have the zahir meaning, the nas meaning, and the ishara meaning. Then you can have the dalala meaning, you can have the all this other stuff. We're going to learn about that stuff later. Okay. وكذلك قوله عليه السلام.
يقول عليه السلام من ملك ذا رحم محرم منه عتق عليه نص في استحقاق العتق القريب وظاهر في ثبوت الملك.
Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, من ملك ذا رحم محرم منه عتق عليه. This is interesting. Okay, what does mahram mean? I don't know what you mean by the question. So go ahead.
When you say what does mahram mean?
What does mahram mean?
Like somebody who you're either related to in a restricted sense through blood or marriage. But like basically you can't marry
through blood or marriage, or there's a third one.
Nursing?
Yes, thank you. So there's 3 types of mahrams you can have. Yeah, through blood. We call it blood. It's not blood. It's fluids like of other sorts, right? I mean, we call it blood, but it's not really blood. Is it blood? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. What's that? Yeah, but it's through like there was exchange of fluids, but it wasn't really blood.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't blood.
Oh, you're saying because like literally around some blood type or anything.
Yeah, we call it blood, but it like literally it's not blood. It's like majaz, right? Okay. Anyway, so either it's like let's call it biological. I was gonna say through intimacy, but then there's also like petri dishes and stuff. So you could have like I guess it doesn't have to be like either it's biological, or it's through marriage, or through breastfeeding, right? So your mother-in-law, you're mahram to your mother-in-law through marriage, mahram to your wife through marriage, right? There's other relationships. Then there's breastfeeding, and then there's biological. Okay. So there's 3 types of mahrams. Why am I bringing this up? It's not a class of mahrams. The reason I bring this up because when the Prophet said, "Man malaka dha rahimin mahramin minhu utiqa alayhi," this specific hadith is referring to ذو رحم. He is not referring to all mahrams. He didn't say man malaka mahraman. Okay. He said man malaka ذا رحم محرم. So it was a little, it's what's the way to describe it? It's muqayyad, right? It's not unrestricted mahrams. It's a specific type of mahram. These are your zu rahims. The zu rahims are only your biological mahrams. Your uncle, your brother, your grandfather, not your cousin, right? Etc. Okay, so the point is, Rasulullah is saying, if you end up owning one of your zu rahims, mahrams, then they're going to be free. The nas meaning of this is the nas is what?
Like them being free.
The nas is that they will become free, like their right to be freed. Okay, that they will become free. That's the literal meaning of the hadith. That's why the Prophet said it to explain, like, hey, look, you went up to the market, you bought your son who was a slave, they're gonna be free. That's the point. Okay. But it's also zahid in the fact that you ended up owning it. We've talked about this before. Like you own them for that split second until they're free, right? So of course we're Hanafi people, Hanafi book readers or whatever, and so we're gonna have to explain our Hanafi logic, and so we explain, aha, see, we end up owning them. It's zahid in that. Did the Prophet say that? No, but we take it like that. That's how we've taken it for that split second. Okay, so that's our third example. No, fourth example, whatever it is. We've covered multiple examples of Wahid and Nas. Okay, and we also did the Hukm al-Wahid wa Nasli. Okay, and so now what remains is we're going to do the Tafri'un on page 76, and then we're going to talk about the more important issue, which is Mata yadhharu al-farqu baynahuma, which is on page 77. Okay, let's do that at 9 o'clock, inshallah.
How often do you commute to Long Beach?
4 days a week.
How many?
4 days a
4
week.
days a week. So you basically go Orange to Long Beach, or do you come here first and then you go in the evening?
Wednesday, I come here. Yeah.
Wednesday. Okay. Oh, so basically you held it 4 days.
There's 3 days where I go straight to Long Beach. 1 day when I come here,
And then you go.
and then Fridays I try and work from home if I can. Oh man, the next example is gonna get crazy. Okay, بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Let's continue wherever we left off. Okay, تفريغ وعلى هذا قلنا let's see where first here. Yeah, I want to go back to this point. وجوب العمل بهما عامين كان أو خاصين مع احتمال إرادة الغير وذلك بمنزلة المجاز مع الحقيقة. The point that's being made, why are we comparing حقيقة and majaz to ظاهر النص? The reason we're comparing it is anytime I use a حقيقة, or anytime I make a statement and you think it's حقيقة, but it's actually majaz, or I make a statement. Yeah, basically, let's just say I make a statement and you think it's haqiqa, but it's actually majaz. No, let me say it differently. I make a statement, you think it's haqiqa, but there's a possibility I meant majaz, right? There's a possibility I meant majaz. Similarly, with the zahir and the nas, I say something that's zahir, you think you know the meaning, or I say something that's nas, you think you know the meaning, but there's a possibility, but there's that there of that statement being takhsis or ta'wiled or naskhed, right? It's possible that there's another interpretation of that there's something more specific that might be excluded from that. Because you can do takhsis of the am, you can do qayd of the mutlaq, you can do ta'wil of the meaning, you can do naskh of it, right? And because of that, we say there's ihtimali iradat al-ghayr. That I said one thing, but the meaning that I intended or the meaning that you understood might be slightly different. Same way as haqiqa and majaz. Okay, تفريع وعلى هذا قلنا.
وعلى هذا قلنا إذا اشترى قريبه حتى عتق عليه يكون هو معتقا ويكون الولاء له.
That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah. It's a comma.
Okay, so what's that?
It has a comma, so that I guess it's just.
Yeah, it has a comma, but that's fine. It doesn't matter. Okay, so what we're saying is, وَعَلَى هَذَا قُلْنَا, based on this we say, yeah, but the problem, okay. This is just a side point, okay? So if you're going to look at it after as وَحُكْمُ الظَّاهِرِ وَالنَّصِّ, it's not going to make any sense to you. تفريع means it's a side point, it's a furu'i point that's coming from the previous hadith, which is وَكَذَلِكَ قَوْلُهُ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ مَنْ مَلَكَ ذَا رَحِمٍ مَحْرَمٍ مِنْهُ عُتِقَ عَلَيْهِ. What we said was there's a zahir meaning and a nas meaning. Well, why is that useful? Why is it useful? Why is it useful to know that you ended up owning the slave? There's actually a practical implication to this. There's a very practical implication to you that did you own the slave or did you not own the slave? Here's the practical implication. The practical implication is إذا اشترى قريبه حتى عتق عليه يكون هو معتقا. What's the difference between mu'tiq and mu'taq?
Mu'taq is the person freeing someone, and mu'taq is the person being freed.
Yes, ismul fa'il versus ismul maf'ul. The mu'tiq is the freer of the slave, the mu'taq is the freed slave. So what happens is, let's say I go to the market and I find my son as a slave in the market. And as soon as I pay $1,000 to buy my son, he gets freed. We did say there was a split second where I am the owner. And this is important because وَيَكُونُ الْوَلَاءُ لَهُ. I become the mawla, or he becomes the mawla. The word mawla has both meanings. He becomes a freed slave, and I become the freer of the slave, which gives me wala. What does it mean that I have wala? What does wala mean in this context? Why does it matter that I have wala? The wala that we're talking about in this case is the wala'ul itaqa, the wala that comes from freeing a slave. And this wala is important because it gives me the right to inherit from that slave if they have no other male heirs. So even though I didn't like technically free him, like I didn't like say you're free, but I bought him and that freed him automatically, I still got the wala. And because of that wala, I get inheritance from two aspects. I get inheritance from being a relative, and I get inheritance from having wala. So this has a practical implication. Okay, that's it's not just like, oh, it's wahid in the ownership. The ownership resulted in wala. The wala resulted in me being able to inherit from the slave. Okay. Now let's get to the good stuff. So far, everything we were talking about, there were no contradictions. Now let's get some issues where we have contradiction between the wahid and the nas.
وإنما يظهر التفاوت بينهما عند المقابلة ولهذا لو قال لها طلقي نفسك فقالت أمنت نفسي يقع الطلاق رجعيا لأن هذا نص في الطلاق ظاهر في البينونة فيترجح العمل في النص.
Okay, so a man says to his wife, طلقي نفسك, go divorce yourself. She says, أمنت نفسي, I give myself an irrevocable divorce. Okay, يقع الطلاق رجعيا. The talaq that takes place is a revocable divorce. He said, divorce yourself. She said, I divorce myself in a ba'in fashion, which would be irrevocable. The actual talaq that took place is actually a revocable one, a raj'i one. Why? لأن هذا نص في الطلاق ظاهر في البينونة فيترجح العمل بالنص. He's giving her the right to divorce. But he only gave her a right to, when he by default, when he said talaq is irrevocable. So when he said give yourself a divorce, he used the word talaq explicitly. When we use the word talaq explicitly, what type of divorce is that? No.
You said when you use
talaq explicitly, it's sarih. Therefore, it's going to be raj'i. So he's giving her the right to do a revocable divorce. He said talaq. That's explicit, it's sarih. It should be raj'i. She says, oh, I'm going to give myself a ba'in divorce. But so what we have over here is لأن هذا نص في الطلاق ظاهر في البينونة فترجع العمل بالنص. She used a verse, she used the word baynuna, but her wording is going to be why. Because the right that he gave her, the nas, the purpose for it was, hey, look, you can give yourself a divorce. The nas that he restricted it to, you can give yourself a raj'i divorce. That's the default. She is trying to go beyond that. That's the expression. The zahir of her expression is that it's going to be an irrevocable divorce. But within the context of the fact that she can't do that, the nas was a revocable divorce. The actual effect that's going to take place is a revocable divorce. رجعي only. وكذلك
وكذلك قول عليه السلام يحيى عرينة إشراكه من أبوابها وأتباعها نص في بيان سبب الشفاء.
Okay, here's the issue. So who are these أهل عرينة people? And anyone remember the story? Do you remember? Anyone remember? Say yes or no. Who are the people? Okay, you can read about Ahlul Arina. I don't want to get too distracted by that. But anyway, they came to the Prophet and they, I'll summarize it. They came to Medina, they accepted Islam, but they became very ill, sick, because they weren't used to the climate of Medina. And so the Prophet gave them camels and told them to go outside of Medina, and he told them to drink from the camels as medicine. Okay, and when they did, they were cured. But then they got greedy, and there's a whole story. The Prophet gave them a severe punishment. But anyway, like there's a whole story behind this. But here's the thing: وَكَذَلِكَ قَالُوا عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ, the Prophet said to these people, "إِشْرَبُوا مِنْ أَبْوَالِهَا وَأَلْبَانِهَا." He said to them, "Drink from the camels, their urine and their milk." This is the hadith that creates the famous ikhtilaf on camel urine. نَصٌ فِي بَيَانِ سَبَبِ الشِّفَاءِ. Why did he tell him to do that? Because it was nas in explaining that it was a cure. It wasn't nas that you should be drinking. It's it's nas that it was cure. He made it very clear. Drink from this because this is the cure. وَظَاهِرٌ فِي إِجَازَةِ شُرُبِ الْبَوْلِ. But it's zahir in like general drinking of camel urine. But it's nas for it being a cure. وَقَوْلُهُ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ. Okay, so if all you had with this hadith this hadith, اشربوا من أبوالها وألبانها, in the context of the larger hadith, okay, not just these words, but in the context of the larger hadith. Why did the Prophet said, drink the camel urine and the milk? He said this because it was nas for it being a cure for their problem. But it also was wahid, hey, if you can drink camel urine, then camel urine must be okay. Okay? Wahid. For that. Nas for being a cure. So it's وَظَاهِرٌ فِي إِجَازَةِ شُرُوبِ الْبَوْلِ. Okay? However, there's another hadith. وَقَوْلُهُ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ. Did you read this already?
وقال عليه السلام ما سقط السماء
No. Above that. وقوله عليه السلام استنزفوا.
وقال عليه السلام استنزفوا من البول فإن عامة عذاب القبر منه نص في وجوب الاحتراز من البول. يترجح النص على الظاهر فلا يحل شرب البول أصلا.
Okay, so we have one hadith where the Prophet says, drink from the camel urine and the milk. There's another one that says, استنزفوا من البول. Like stay away from urine because like refrain from it because فإن عامة عذاب القبر منه, because the bulk of the punishment of the grave is because of it. This is nas in saying stay away from the urine, like, keep clean from it. فيترجح النص على الظاهر. So one of them seems to be having a wahid meaning that says camel urine is okay, and the other one is nas in that it's not okay. فلا يحل شرب البول أصلا. Therefore, drinking camel urine is not allowed. You see how the nas went over the wahid?
Yes, but the immediate thought that comes to your mind is like, couldn't you specify that the hadith was talking about the restriction?
Which hadith?
Like about the bulk of the punishment, right? That's talking about a specific context, right?
Oh, you mean human urine?
Sorry?
It could be about human urine?
Yeah, like that's the first thing that comes to mind. Right?
Okay.
Like how do you?
But it's not. It's you could, but the wording is mutlaq, not muqayyad. So if you're gonna say it's human urine, then you're making something muqayyad that the wording is mutlaq.
That makes sense. I guess go back to
By the way, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you, but from an usuli perspective, you're like, well, you're adding that word.
Yeah.
So you're saying dog urine is okay.
No, this is going back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I guess that's the usually principle.
Yeah.
But in reality,
Okay.
people aren't that cautious.
Yeah. So this issue of camel urine, by the way, is like, God, it's like all over the place in different madhabs and different, even in the Hanafi madhab. So Imam Abu Hanifa says you cannot drink camel urine. Period. What does Imam Muhammad say? Anyone know? Imam Muhammad says you can. Okay. And what does Abu Yusuf say? Abu Yusuf says it's permissible for medicinal purposes. So he takes the middle path. Abu Hanifa, no. Imam Muhammad, yes. Abu Yusuf, okay for medicinal purposes. So then how does Abu Hanifa explain if there's this hadith, if there's a istanzihu min al-bawli, if that's the hadith, then how does he explain ishrabu min abwaliha wa albaniha? He still has a problem to solve, right? How's he going to solve that? So there's a few different explanations that are given. One is, if you look through the different versions of this narration, or this is Hanafi's like kind of like explaining it away. If you look at the different versions of this narration, you will find many versions which just say milk. They don't mention urine. And so one answer is that this is a mistake. That's one answer. I haven't personally done the research on this. I haven't looked at all the variations, but I would be okay with that answer. Another explanation that's given is that this permission of ishrabu min abwaliha wa albaniha was specific to this ahlu urayna, for this specific situation, for these people, for this,
It's like a tradition, custom.
No, specific to this group of people.
Because we have the hadith about that.
Yeah.
So that's just explaining that.
Yeah. I would also be okay with that explanation. That is specific to these people. The third explanation.
If it's specific, what's so special about those people that it's specifically for them?
Read the hadith. They were acting all crazy.
But also the Prophet says
Okay.
Yeah. They were being like really weird. But yeah, the Prophet ﷺ could give an answer to a specific person about something, right? So I don't know if I brought this example here, but the example of doing I think I brought it here. The example of doing Umrah in Ramadan, right? I'm of the view that the Prophet ﷺ was talking to this specific woman who happened to have missed Hajj with him, and she was bothered by it. And he said, you know what? Doing Umrah in Ramadan is like Hajj for you. You missed Hajj, don't worry about it. It's okay.
I see. Okay.
So it could be specific. I don't have a problem with that explanation either. So one answer is that it was just milk, not urine. Second one is specific to the group. The third answer, I'm also okay with this one, is that when you say ishrabu min abwaliha wa albaniha, what it means is this answer is a little more, questionable, but it still would be valid to say that he didn't mean drink the urine and drink the milk. He meant drink the milk and use the urine as a ointment, like apply it on yourself. And sometimes we do this type of thing in Arabic. Sometimes we will use one verb for two nouns when we actually only meant it for one of the nouns. And sometimes we will use one noun for two different things when it only applies to one. What do I mean by that? There's a hadith al-musalsal bil aswadain. There's a hadith which is transmitted where everyone drinks dates and everyone has dates and water. What does aswad mean? Yeah. Okay. So dates are called, something aswad because it's black because they're very dark. Water is not black. Okay, but we just say aswadain because those two go together. Okay. There is sometimes we will say words like Umarain, like Abu Bakr and Umar, when only one of them is actually Umar. Okay, so in Arabic, this sometimes you do this. So you could say like ishrabu min abwaliha wa albaniha. You could say what it means is drink the milk and use the urine. You could create that argument. Okay, so there's many ways to create arguments. If you want to explain it, you can explain things. Okay, that's just what it is.
Here's a question, Jay.
Yeah.
It's the same thing I've always asked before. So when we're saying that Imam Hanifa has this opinion that you can't, and we're saying that Imam Muhammad says you can,
Yeah.
right? And then his other student, right, Abu Yusuf says conditionally.
Yeah.
Are they deriving all of those different conclusions from the same usuli frame?
No, these are opinions we know from them. These are their opinions.
Okay, so
from the books of Imam Muhammad.
But when we're saying like the whole context about you saying, right, like you can't make it muqayyad because it's mutlaq. Right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand it from there.
Yeah, from their perspective, the reality is like they didn't have usul al-fiqh like this.
Okay.
Like they didn't explain it using these terms.
Yeah.
They had their own ways of looking at it.
No, but the point being is when we're saying that this is a Hanafi usul, I know we trace it back to Imam Hanifa.
Yeah.
But by extension, are we not saying that the same usul apply to the other Hanafis that came after him? Or are we only applying it to that?
No, we're saying that, but like we don't have any proof for that.
So in theory, there is an explanation within this framework to result in Abu Yusuf
or outside this framework. I think what I'm trying to say is for us to take the usul that we've learned and back project and say, oh, they follow this usul. Well, we don't know that.
No, of course.
Right? But what we know is they had these differences of opinion and we don't exactly know why. But we can guess. We can say, oh, maybe Imam Muhammad did think like you're thinking, and it was talking about urine in this sense and that sense and whatever. Abu Yusuf thought this and whatever. We don't know. We don't know why. We can go back to like Kitab al-Asl. Maybe we'll find the explanation for this particular issue why they thought the way they did.
So that makes sense. From like we don't ever really know. I guess the underlying premise I'm trying to understand is the purpose of us studying usul, right?
So what we've done is we've created these usul at some point, and now we are making the claim that everybody follows these usul.
So I just want to make sure I'm thinking of that. Are we saying
we being the author?
I know they're not explicitly saying, right, Imam Muhammad followed these usul, right? But just the fact that they resulted in three different opinions. Are we saying they resulted in three different opinions following the same usul? potentially, right? Is that like our justification of it?
So it's our justification of it because we're bringing this hadith in this example under this topic. We're writing a book of usul here, and we decided to bring this hadith, and we ignored the fact that Imam Muhammad and Abu Yusuf disagreed. It's not even mentioned here. All we're saying is فَيَتَرَجَّحُ النَّصُّ عَلَى الظَّاهِرِ فَلَا يَحِلُّ شُرْبُ الْبَوْلِ أصلا done. We started with Abu Hanifa, we didn't even choose to mention the other two.
But would that be the usuli argument that they follow the same thing? We don't know why, but they follow the same framework.
If it was the same usul and they were agreeing with this, then they wouldn't have disagreed. If they believe that this was zahir and this hadith is zahir and that hadith is nas, then we would have come to the same conclusion, but they didn't come to the same conclusion. So they followed some other argument.
Yeah.
We're trying to make this example be an example of this usul.
Okay.
Maybe it isn't for them.
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe that's not how they look at it. Maybe they don't look at it as this hadith is zahir, this hadith is nas. That's just how the author looked at it.
Yeah, that's
by the way, the author looked at it that way because the Jassas looked at it that way. The Jassas looked at it that way because Ibn Aban looked at it that way. So Ibn Aban is the one who kind of like put this stake in the ground, but doesn't mean he's right.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm thinking of this, I really want to better understand it. So I understand everything that you're saying. And yes, there's a difference in opinion of what one person can see as law and another person can see as nuts, right? That's going to get different conclusions. From an usuli perspective, though, is the only thing that matters is like, because they don't do all of the others outside of the Ahnaf, like the Shafi'i, Maliki, etc. Do they have the same terminologies, frameworks? They just
very similar framework and slightly different terminologies.
Okay. Yeah. So what we're basically saying is people, which makes sense, can use the same framework.
Yeah.
Right? But just
so the point of like me sitting here and teaching this to you and what the author is trying to say is there's a thing called zahir, there's a thing called nas. We understand those concepts, we've given those words meanings. We've made up these words, but the idea is we can have a common vocabulary and we can use this framework to say something that is nas should be preferred or something that is zahir. I 100% agree with that. I don't think you can have a difference of opinion on that. If Allah is saying something and that's the purpose of the speech, that you have to give it more importance than something that wasn't the purpose of the speech. So I think this is something we can universally agree upon, logical, makes sense, everything's good. If I start bringing specific examples and I say this versus this hadith is zahir in this hadith is nas for this, and that's why I'm preferring this over that, now I'm like, it's a madhab opinion or a personal opinion, something like that. A Shafi'i might be like, I didn't look at it as zahir and nas at all. I looked at it as two hadith, both of them are authentic, both of them have to apply, and my meaning is this and my meaning is that. This has nothing to do with zahir and nas. Okay. Or like, no, yes, they're both nas or they're both zahir and the meaning here is muqayyad. Yes, the literal wording is not muqayyad, but why are you being so literal about this? Like, why can't it be? This is talking about, look at the context of the process, and I've said this in. This is about like, hey, when you go to the bathroom, be careful. That's what he meant. And when you go to stables and like, when the dogs are around, all this, be careful of urine. But like, this is about camel urine, right? There's a bunch of madhabs that allow camel urine. And so they have to come up with an answer, and they're going to explain it that way.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think the uninformed approach to usul is like, if you're operating within a madhab, everyone comes to similar conclusions, right?
Yeah.
But the point is your framework is all going to be the same within the madhab, but your interpretation of that framework is still be different.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, yes, but also within the usul, within the madhab as well, there will be different people with different usul. I'm just saying the zahir nas thing is really not very controversial versus something like the aam being in the Quran being qat'i. Even within the Hanafis, there is a strand of Hanafis that will say, no, the aam in the Quran is zanni. The group that seems to have won is the one that says aam in the Quran is qat'i. Okay, that's the prevalent opinion that we find in the books. But if you go back to the early books, you're going to find a bunch of people who say, no, aam in the Quran is zanni. The Malikis say that, the Shafi'is say that, the Hanbalis say that, and a group from the Hanafis say that. Right? So it's not just within the madhab the same usul apply. So two things. Number one, the usul within the madhab are generally relatively consistent, but there may be some differences of opinion. Something like zahir nas, it's easy. Something like aam being qat'i in the Quran, there's going to be difference of opinion. Okay. Number two, even if you've agreed upon the usul, the question becomes your application of the usul. Somebody saying like this is a zahir versus nas issue. Someone else might be like, no, it's not Allah versus nas issue. That hadith is weak, forget it. That hadith, look at the hadith, it has all this illah in it. It's only coming from this person. That person was kazzab, this is that, boom, dismiss. This is not a Allah versus nas issue. You're making a Allah versus nas issue. Okay, well, great. So now we forget even if we agree on the same usul. We're arguing like, is that the usul we're going to apply in this example? Then let's say we even agree, okay, this is a Allah versus nas issue. There could still be some other difference of opinion that could cause us to disagree, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to
Layers and layers of this, right? You have to like go through the layers of the end. It's not just one thing. There's many layers of this. Okay, وقوله عليه السلام.
وقول عليه السلام ما سقطت السماء ففيه العشر نص في بيان العشر وقول عليه السلام ليس في الخضراوات صدقة وأول في نفي العشر لأن الصدقة يحتمل وجودا فيترجم الأول على الثاني.
Okay, so we have the saying of the Prophet ما سقطت السماء ففيه العشر. So we know this concept of ushr, right? That you have to pay either 5%, well, ushr means 10%, but you either have to pay 10% or 5% on the harvest that you have from your farm, your field, whatever, right? If you irrigated, you had to do something to irrigate it, then it's 5%. And if it is ما سقطه السماء, that the irrigation was natural, it was through rain, you don't have to do anything, then you're going to pay 10%, right? It's nasun fi bayan al-ushri. The purpose of it was to say that you're going to pay 10%. But we have a conflict because وقوله عليه السلام, the Prophet also said, ليس في الخضروات صدقة. There's no sadaqah on vegetables. So if you think there's no sadaqah on vegetables, this seems to be going opposite to the fact that you have to pay 10% on the harvest. So which one do you take? Which of these hadith are you going to take? So the way that we look at it is we say the first one is nas. First one is nas because it's specifically talking about ushr, which is like a type of zakat, right? The second one is laysa fil khadrawati sadaqa. The word sadaqa, when we say this is talking about like zakat or whatever, that's a mu'awwal meaning. It's we're trying to extrapolate a meaning, and that meaning is going to be it's a wahid meaning or a mu'awwal meaning. It's not even wahid, it's mu'awwal. We're trying to interpret something. The first one is nas, it was clear. Ma saqathu as-sama'u fafihi al-ushr. Very, very clear. If there's anything that's going to be irrigated from the skies, you're going to pay 10% on that. And so we're going to take the nas meaning over the mu'awwal meaning, and we're going to pay the 10% zakat on the vegetables that are harvested.
So would another usul argument be how do you define vegetables, and can you basically make it different from the meaning or no?
You could, but vegetables are kind of like defined pretty easily in language. There's no istilahi definition, right? It's just like people know what vegetables are.
I just like the whole fruits perception, tomato, fruit, vegetable type, I get it. So
Yeah, I don't think you'll get very far with that argument. Let's quickly do this one. تعريف المفسر.
تعريف المفسر وأما المفسر فهو ما ظهر المراد باللفظ في بيان من قبل المتكلم بحيث لا يبقى مع احتمال التأويل والتخصيص. So the mufassir is the one that is ظهر المراد من اللفظ. The intention, the objective becomes very clear from the words ببيان, due to an explanation that's provided من قبل المتكلم. The speaker themselves have clarified it in such a manner بحيث لا يبقى, there does not remain at all معه احتمال التأويل والتخصيص. There's no room left for interpretation or specification. It has become absolutely clear with the speech itself. مثاله في قوله تعالى فسجد الملائكة كلهم أجمعون. The example is Allah says in the Quran فسجد الملائكة كلهم أجمعون, that all of the angels. So Allah says فسجد الملائكة. What does that mean to you when you say فسجد الملائكة? Is it all the angels or some of the angels? The angels prostrated. All angels, right? The angels prostrated means all the angels prostrated. Did it need further explanation? Well, maybe like when I said the angels prostrated, when I say the people came to the masjid, the people of the town came to the masjid, maybe somebody didn't come. Maybe one person, maybe there was an angel who didn't
But no. Allah makes it clear. He says, كلهم, every single one of them. In case there was any doubt, the angels prostrated already means all of the angels prostrated, but maybe a few of them were busy or they didn't go. No, كلهم, all of them prostrated. And then in case you thought, now you're thinking, okay, all the angels prostrated. Okay, got that part, right? كلهم. Not one was an exception. But maybe like one did it, and then the other one did it, and then the third one did it. Or maybe like, they were slightly like off. And no, أجمعون, all together, all of them at once. Not at different times, all at once. So now you can vividly imagine all of the angels, boom, all of them prostrating, all at the same time, no room for doubt. فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَجْمَعُونَ. كُلُّهُم was not needed. أجمعون was not needed, but it brought a level of clarity that now you have no doubt in your mind. This is mufassal. This is what we mean by mufassal. فَاسْمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ ظَاهِرٌ فِي الْعُمُومِ. This malaikatu was ظاهر, that is all of them. إلا أن احتمال التخصيص قائم. However, there was a possibility that maybe some of them didn't do it, right? The possibility of تخصيص. فانسد باب التخصيص بقوله كلهم. So Allah shut that door of doing تخصيص with the word كلهم. ثم بقي احتمال التفرقة في السجود. So there was still the possibility they did it, one did it, the other one did it. فانسد باب التأويل بقوله أجمعون. Allah shut that door with the word أجمعون. وفي الشرعيات إذا قال تزوجت فلانة شهرا بكذا فقوله تزوجت ظاهر في النكاح إلى. Okay, we'll do this one next time, inshallah. Because this one's getting into a longer one. We'll do that next time, but we get the idea of mufassar is like shutting off all of these possibilities, right? All of them, all at the same time. And we're going to get into another example of mufassar. Then we're going to do muhkam, which is really easy. And then we're going to finish mutaqabilat next time, inshallah. That's the goal. Class next week will be online, inshallah. I will be in Riyadh.
We're off next week, right? For Thanksgiving break.
Oh, are we off next week? Oh.
Yeah.
If that's the case, then
We have the whole week, or
that's a good question. Let me look at.
I think it's the whole week.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. If we're off, then I will not be online. I do have the calendar, so yeah, I think you're right. Thanksgiving week is off. Thanksgiving week. Yes, next week is off. Never mind. I'm gonna delete that from my calendar. What cause confusion? Okay. So in that case, I will let you know if there's class the week after or not. Most likely not, because actually, yeah, I might be swapping with someone, but yeah, I will be at Umrah the week after, so we'll see what happens. But definitely no class next week. Enjoy your break. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم.
alaikum assalam.
Sorry for that, really. Conversation is super helpful.
No, what I want is like more important than
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم. Anyone back?
عليكم السلام. Yes, sir.
Let's see. بداية النحو. So we'll just do a little bit of Jalalain, specifically just Surah Al-Jathiyah, which is 4 pages, and then we have 6 pages of Hidayat al-Nahu up until the end of the chapter of Mansubat. So we'll just do Surah Jathiyah. Bismillah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وما بعد. So Surah Jathiyah is a Makki surah. Talks about the usul of Iman and talks about Bani Israel and the blessings Allah had given to Bani Israel and their ikhtilafat with their prophets, and the opposite is emphasized for the Ummah of the Prophet to not have ikhtilaf with the Prophet and to focus on the Amr of the Prophet ﷺ and to follow his Sharia, right? And some aspects of the Day of Judgment are mentioned. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. حاميم. الله أعلم بمراده به. تنزيل الكتاب القرآن مبتدأ من الله، خبره العزيز في ملكه الحكيم في صنعه. إن في السماوات والأرض أي في خلقهما لآيات دالة على قدرة الله ووحدانيته تعالى للمؤمنين. وفي خلقكم أي خلق كل منكم من نطفة ثم علقة ثم مضغة إلى أن صار إنسانا، وخلق ما يبث يفرق في الأرض من دابة هي ما يدب على الأرض من الناس وغيرهم، آيات لقوم يوقنون بالبعث واختلاف الليل والنهار ذهابهما ومجيئهما. وما أنزل الله من السماء من رزق مطر لأنه سبب الرزق، فأحيا به الأرض بعد موتها، وتصريف الرياح تقليبها مرة جنوبا ومرة شمالا وباردة وحارة، آيات لقوم يعقلون. الدليل فيؤمنون. تلك الآيات المذكورة آيات الله حججه الدالة على وحدانيته، نتلوها نقصها عليك بالحق، متعلق بنتلو، فبأي حديث بعد الله أي حديثه وهو القرآن، وآياته حججه تؤمنون أي كفار مكة أي لا يؤمنون، وفي قراءة بالتاء. Hamim. Allah knows what's meant by that. The revelation of this book, the Quran, which is a mubtada, is from Allah, is its khabar, the Almighty in His kingdom, all wise in His actions, fairly in the heavens and the earth, meaning in both of their creation, are signs indicating to his divine ability and his oneness for the believers. And in your own creation, in the creation of each one of you, from a sperm drop, then a clot of blood, mudghah, piece of flesh, until he became a human, and the creation of whatever living beings he dispersed in the earth. Dabba is what moves on the earth of people and other things. Are signs for people of sure faith of resurrection, and in the alternation of the day and night, it's coming and going. And the provisions sent down from the skies by Allah, provisions meaning rain, because it is the reason of provisions, reviving the earth after its death, and the shifting of the winds. It's moving sometimes to the south, sometimes to the north. And cold and hot are signs for people of understanding, understanding the reason for that, and then believe. These signs that are mentioned are Allah's revelations, the proofs that indicate to his oneness, which we relate to you, O Prophet, in truth. And bilhaq is connected to natlu. So what message will they believe in after Allah, meaning after his speech, and that is the Quran, and his revelations, his proofs, meaning so what message will they, the disbelievers of Mecca, believe in after Allah and his revelations, meaning they will not believe. And in a qira'ah, تؤمنون. ويل كلمة عذاب لكل أفاك كذاب أثيم كثير الإثم يسمع آيات الله القرآن تتلى عليه ثم يصر على كفره مستكبرا متكبرا عن الإيمان كأن لم يسمعها فبشره بعذاب أليم مؤلم. وإذا علم من آياتنا أي القرآن شيئا اتخذها هزوا أي مهزوءا بها. أولئك أي الأفاكون لهم عذاب مهين ذو إهانة من ورائهم أي أمامهم، لأنهم في الدنيا جهنم ولا يغني عنهم ما كسبوا من المال والفعال شيئا ولا ما اتخذوا من دون الله أي الأصنام أولياء ولهم عذاب عظيم. هذا أي القرآن هدى من الضلالة. والذين كفروا بآيات ربهم لهم عذاب حظ من رجز أي عذاب أليم موجع. Woe to every sinful liar, and wail is a word of punishment. A theme, sinful, that commits a lot of sins. They hear Allah's revelations of the Quran recited to them, then persist upon their disbelief arrogantly against faith, as if they did not hear them, so give them good news of a painful punishment. And whenever they learn anything of our revelations, meaning the Quran, they make a mockery of it. It is they, meaning the liars, who will suffer a humiliating punishment. Awaiting them is the hellfire. من ورائهم. So min wara'ihim meaning in front of them, because they are in this world.
Mhm.
وَلَا يُغْنِي عَنْهُمْ, their gains will be of no benefit to them, of wealth and actions, nor will those protectors, meaning the idols they have taken besides Allah, and they will suffer a tremendous punishment. This meaning the Quran is guidance from misguidance, and those who deny their Lord's revelations will suffer will suffer a painful punishment. الله الذي سخر لكم البحر لتجري الفلك السفن فيه بأمره بإذنه ولتبلغ
من ورائهم أي أمامهم لأنهم في الدنيا. In front of them is the is in front of them is the punishment of the fire, because they have to look forward to it because they're still in the dunya. لأنهم في الدنيا. Right? Okay.
So min wara'ihim means like it waiting for them.
Well, in front of them, meaning it is yet to come, right?
Okay. But wara generally means behind, right? But in this
So-
context, it means in front of them.
So if you look at footnote number 10, no, footnote number 11, it says that وراء اسم للجهة التي يراويها الشخص من خلف وقدام. So it could be like any direction, right?
Okay.
So من ورائهم, Khattab, for example, says awaiting them is hell, which is yet to come. And Mufti Taqi says in front of them.
الله الذي سخر لكم البحر لتجري الفلك السفن فيه بأمره بإذنه ولتبتغوا تطلبوا بالتجارة من فضله ولعلكم تشكرون وسخر لكم ما في السماوات من شمس وقمر ونجم وماء وغيره وما في الأرض من دابة وشجر ونبات وأنهار وغيرها أي خلق ذلك لمنافعكم جميعا تأكيد منه حال أي سخرها كائنة منه تعالى إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون فيها فيؤمنون. قل للذين آمنوا يغفروا للذين لا يرجون يخافون أيام الله وقائعه أي يغفروا للكفار ما وقع منهم من الأذى لكم وهذا قبل الأمر بجهادهم ليجزي أي الله وفي قراءة بالنون قوما بما كانوا يكسبون من الغفر للكفار أذاهم من عمل صالحا
من الغفر. So غفر يغفر غفر.
من عمل صالحا فلنفسه عمل ومن أساء فعليها أساء ثم إلى ربكم ترجعون تصيرون فيجازي المصلح والمسيء. He is subjected for Allah is the one who has subjected the sea for you so that ships may sail upon it by his command, by his permission, and that you may seek his bounty through trade, and that perhaps you will be grateful. He subjected for you whatever is in the heavens, the sun, the moon, the stars, water, and other things, and whatever is on the earth. of creatures and trees and plants, rivers and other than that, meaning he created that for your benefit, all by his grace. So جميعا is for emphasis and منه is the حال, meaning سخرها كائنة. He subjected it like by his will. Surely in this are signs for people who reflect and believe. Tell the believers to forgive those who do not fear Allah's days. وقائعه, its occurrence, meaning forgive the disbelievers for ما وقع منه من الأذى لكم, for their harm towards you. And this was before the command of fighting them, so that Allah will reward each group for what they used to commit, of forgiving the disbelievers for their harm. And it can be read in a qira'ah, it's read للتجزية. Whoever does good, it is to their own benefit, and whoever does evil, it is to their own loss. Then to your Lord you will all be returned, and he will recompense the one who does good and the one who does evil. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْكِتَابَ التَّوْرَاةَ وَالْحُكْمَ به بين الناس والنبوة لموسى وهارون منهم ورزقناهم من الطيبات الحلالات كالمن والسلوى وفضلناهم على العالمين عالمي زمانهم العقلاء وآتيناهم بينات من الأمر. Sorry.
No problem.
وآتيناهم بينات من الأمر أمر الدين من الحلال والحرام وبعثة محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام. فما اختلفوا في بعثته إلا من بعد ما جاءهم العلم بغيا بينهم، أي لبغي حدث بينهم حسدا له. إن ربك يقضي بينهم يوم القيامة فيما كانوا فيه يختلفون. ثم جعلناك يا محمد على شريعة طريقة من الأمر أمر الدين فاتبعها ولا تتبع أهواء الذين لا يعلمون في عبادة غير الله. إنهم لن يغنوا يدفعوا عنك من الله من عذابه شيئا وإن الظالمين الكافرين بعضهم أولياء بعض والله ولي المتقين المؤمنين. هذا القرآن بصائر للناس معالم يتبصرون.
So تبصر يتبصر.
يتبصرون بها في الأحكام والحدود وهدى ورحمة لقوم يؤمنون بالبعث. Indeed, we gave Bani Israel the scripture, the Torah, wisdom to judge between people, and prophethood through Musa and Harun from amongst them, granted them good, lawful provisions, like al-man and as-salwa, and favored them above the others. عالمي زمانهم, favored them above.
So
yeah.
عالمي زمانهم العقلاء وفضلناهم على العالمين. So we uh, gave them status over the uqala of their time from the worlds. عالمي زمانهم. Like it's not for all time, but it's their time. So footnote number 7 وفضلناهم على العالمين حيث آتيناهم ما لم نؤته أحدا غيرهم حيث آتيناهم إلى آخر إشارة إلى أنه لا حاجة إلى تخصيص العالمين بعالم زمانهم بناء على الظاهر من أن المراد تفضيلهم بما يختص بهم من الفضائل من كثرة الأنبياء فيهم وفلق البحر وغرق عدوهم وإنزال المن والسلوى وانفجار 12 عينا من حجر صغير في مدة تيه وليس المراد تفضيلهم على العالمين بحسب الدين والثواب. So basically in their time and specific for all of the things that happened for them where they had many prophets come to them, the splitting of the ocean, the drowning of the Pharaoh, sending of manna and salwa, Musa alayhi salam hitting the rock and 12 streams of water coming out of that small rock, right? When they settled outside of Egypt, right? For the 12 tribes, 12 streams for the 12 tribes. All of that was specific for them. Okay.
وآتيناهم, we gave them clear commandments regarding their faith of the lawful and unlawful, and the sending of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it was not until but it was not until knowledge came to them that they differed regarding his coming out of mutual envy ببغي حدث بينهم, because of a disagreement.
Yeah, rivalry, because of a rivalry حدث that occurred between them, and حسدا له out of jealousy for him, meaning for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Surely your Lord will judge between them on the day of judgment regarding their differences. Now we have set you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on the way of faith, on the path of faith, from the matter of the religion. So follow it and do not follow the desires of those who do not know. Who do not know who do not know, like not to worship other than Allah. They certainly can be of no benefit to you against Allah, against His punishment whatsoever. Surely the wrongdoers, the disbelievers, are friends to one another, whereas Allah is the friend of the righteous, the believers. This Quran is an insight for humanity. معالم, signs. يتبصرون بها, they can reflect upon.
يتبصرون means to like discern. So ma'alim is kind of like guideposts, right? Like signs, basically. يتبصرون بها, you discern through those signs in the ahkam and hudud.
وهدى, and a guide and mercy for people of sure faith of resurrection. بمعنى همزة الإنكار حسب الذين اجترحوا اكتسبوا السيئات الكفر والمعاصي أن نجعلهم كالذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات سواء خبر محياهم ومماتهم مبتدأ ومعطوف والجملة بدل من الكاف والضميران للكفار. المعنى أحسبوا أن نجعلهم في الآخرة في خير كالمؤمنين، أي في رغد من العيش مساو لعيشهم في الدنيا، حيث قالوا للمؤمنين لئن بعثنا لنعطى من الخير مثل ما تعطون. قال تعالى على وفق إنكاره بالهمزة ساء ما يحكمون، أي ليس الأمر كذلك، فهم في الآخرة في العذاب على خلاف عيشهم في الدنيا، والمؤمنون في الآخرة في الثواب بعملهم الصالحات في الدنيا من الصلاة والزكاة والصيام وغير ذلك. وما مصدرية أي بئس حكما حكمهم هذا. So is so the hamza is used to reject or do those who commit evil deeds, disbelief and sins, think that we will make them equal in their life and after their death. And سواء is the khabar, محياهم ومماتهم is mubtada and معطوف, and the sentence is بدل to كاف أو إن كالذين.
Mhm.
Okay.
So basically, and the Dhamirani, which is the hum, right? Mahyahum wa mamatuhum, right? That is referring to the kuffar.
And it means, do they think that we will make them in the hereafter in goodness, like the believers, meaning in like bliss of living musawin, equal to their living in this life? When they said to the believers, when we are resurrected, we will be given of good similar to what you will be given. And Allah said, وفق إنكاره بالهمزة.
Allah said in accordance to the according to their rejection, which is mentioned by the Hamza.
Okay. Meaning the matter is not like that. So in the hereafter they will be in punishment opposed to.
So basically, if you say the meaning of the ayah is, do they think that we will place them in the akhirah in goodness like the believers, in plenty, like equal to how they had lived in the world, whereby they had told the believers that if we were resurrected, then we would be given good similar to what you will be given. So Allah says, in accordance to that hamza of inkar, sa'a ma yahkumun, how wrong is their judgment? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Meaning the matter is not like that. So in the hereafter they will be suffering and punishment, as opposed to their life in this world, and the believers in the hereafter will be rewarded because of their righteous deeds in this life of prayer and zakah and fasting and other than that. And the ma in sa'a ma yahkumun is masdariya, meaning how evil is their judgment regarding that. وخلق الله السماوات والأرض بالحق متعلق بخلق ليدل على قدرته ووحدانيته ولتجزى كل نفس بما كسبت من المعاصي والطاعات فلا يساوي الكافر والمؤمن وهم لا يظلمون أفرأيت أخبرني من اتخذ إلهه هواه ما يهواه من حجر بعد حجر يراه أحسن وأضله الله على علم منه تعالى أي عالما بأنه من أهل الضلالة قبل خلقه وختم على سمعه وقلبه فلم يسمع الهدى ولم يعقله وجعل على بصره غشاوة ظلمة فلم يبصر الهدى ويقدر هنا المفعول الثاني لرأيت أي أيهتدي فمن يهديه من بعد الله أي بعد إضلاله إياه أي لا يهتدي أفلا يتذكرون تتعظون فيه إدغام إحدى التائين في الذال. And Allah created the heavens and the earth for a purpose. بالحق is connected to خلق to indicate on his divine ability and his oneness, and so that every soul may be paid or recompensed for what it committed of sins and righteous deeds. So the disbeliever and the believer are not equal, and none will be wronged. Have you seen, meaning inform me, those who have taken their own desires as their God? ما يهواه, what they desire of a rock after rock they see as being better than the other. And Allah left them to stray knowingly upon knowledge from Him, the Almighty, meaning knowing that He is from the people of misguidance before His creation, and sealed their hearing and hearts so He cannot listen to guidance and He cannot understand it, and placed a cover on their sight, darkness so they cannot see guidance, and يقدر هنا المفعول. So a second مفعول to لرأيت is implied here, meaning will they be guided? Who can then guide them after Allah? Meaning after Allah led him to stray, meaning he cannot be guided. Will you not then be mindful? تتعظون, take lesson in this is merging one of the ta into the dal. وقالوا أي منكر البعث ما هي أي الحياة إلا حياتنا التي في الدنيا نموت ونحيا أي يموت بعض ويحيا بعض بأن يولدوا وما يهلكنا إلا الدهر أي مرور الزمان. قال تعالى وما لهم بذلك المقول من علم إن ما هم إلا يظنون وإذا تتلى عليهم آياتنا من القرآن الدالة على قدرتنا على البعث بينات واضحات حال ما كان حجتهم إلا أن قالوا ائتوا بآبائنا أحياء إن كنتم صادقين أنا نبعث قل الله يحييكم حين كنتم نطفا ثم يميتكم ثم يجمعكم أحياء إلى يوم القيامة لا ريب فيه ولكن أكثر الناس وهم القائلون ما ذكر لا يعلمون. And they argue, and they say, meaning those who reject resurrection, there is nothing beyond there's nothing beyond our worldly life. Um, نموت ونحيا, we die. Others are born, meaning some die and some are given life by being born. And nothing destroys us but the passage of time. مرور الزمان. Allah said, yet they have no knowledge. Their statement, yet they have no knowledge in support of this claim. They only speculate. And whenever our clear revelations from the Quran, whenever our clear revelations are recited to them from the Quran that indicate, that prove our ability to resurrect, and bayinat, meaning clear, and bayinat is the hal. Their argument is to say, bring our forefathers back alive. If what you say is true, that we will be resurrected, say it is Allah who gives you life. When you were sperm drops, then He will gather you all on the day of judgment, alive, about which there is no doubt. But most people, and they are the ones who say what was mentioned, do not know. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض ويوم تقوم الساعة يبدل منه يومئذ يخسر المبطلون الكافرون أي يظهر خسرانهم بأن يصيروا إلى النار وترى كل أمة أي أهل دين جاثية على الركب أو مجتمعة كل أمة تدعى إلى كتابها كتاب أعمالها ويقال لهم اليوم تجزون ما كنتم تعملون أي جزاءه هذا كتابنا ديوان الحفظة ينطق عليكم بالحق إنا كنا نستنسخ نثبت ونحفظ ما كنتم تعملون نثبت أو نثبت
نثبت.
نثبت ونحفظ ما كنتم تعملون فأما الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فيدخلهم ربهم في رحمته جنته ذلك هو الفوز المبين البين الظاهر وأما الذين كفروا فيقال لهم أفلم تكن آياتي القرآن تتلى عليكم فاستكبرتم تكبرتم وكنتم قوما مجرمين كافرين. To Allah belongs the kingdom of the heavens and the earth, and its badal is ويوم تقوم الساعة, on the day the hour will be established, and its badal is يومئذ يخسر المبطلون, meaning the people of falsehood will be in total loss, meaning the disbelievers, and their loss will become apparent when by them ending up in the hellfire. And you will see every faith community, meaning people of every religion, on its knees, jathia, on their knees or gathered. Every community will be called to its record of deeds, and it will be said to them, this day you will be rewarded for what you used to do. Jaza'ahu, meaning its reward. This record of ours, meaning the record of the guardian angels, ينطق عليكم, speaks the truth about you. Indeed, we always had your deeds recorded. نثبت, so established and preserved by the angels. As for those who believed and did good, their Lord will admit them into His mercy, His Jannah, that is the absolute triumph, and Bayin al-Zahir. the clear victory. And as for those who disbelieved, it will be said to them, were my revelations of the Quran not recited to you, yet you acted arrogantly and were a wicked people, disbelieving people. وإذا قيل لكم أيها الكفار إن وعد الله بالبعث حق والساعة بالرفع والنصب لا ريب شك فيها قلتم ما ندري ما الساعة إن ما نظن إلا ظنا قال المب...
قال المبرد مبرد name of a grammarian. It comes up in Hidayat al-Nahu in the footnotes.
قال المبرد أصله إن نحن إلا نظن ظنا وما نحن بمستيقنين أنها آتية وبدا ظهر لهم في الآخرة سيئات ما عملوا في الدنيا أي جزاؤها وحاق نزل بهم ما كانوا به يستهزئون أي العذاب وقيل اليوم ننساكم نترككم في النار كما نسيتم لقاء يومكم هذا أي تركتم العمل للقائه ومأواكم النار وما لكم من ناصرين مانعين منها ذلكم بأنكم اتخذتم آيات الله القرآن هزوا وغرتكم الحياة الدنيا حتى قلتم لا بعث ولا حساب فاليوم لا يخرجون بالبناء للفاعل والمفعول منها من النار ولا هم يستعتبون أي لا يطلب منهم أن يرضوا ربهم بالتوبة والطاعة لأنها لا تنفع يومئذ فلله الحمد الوصف بالجميل على وفاء وعده في المكذبين رب السماوات ورب الأرض رب العالمين خالق ما ذكر والعالم والعالم
العالم. Yeah, about the word عالمين.
والعالم ما سوى الله وجمع لاختلاف أنواعه وربي بدل وله الكبرياء العظمة في السماوات والأرض حال أي كائنة فيهما وهو العزيز الحكيم تقدم. And whenever it was said to you, O disbelievers, surely Allah's promise of resurrection is true. And there is, okay, والساعة لا ريب.
Yeah.
Is true, and there is no doubt about the hour. بالرفع والنصب, so it can be read والساعة or والساعة. You said, we do not know what the hour is. We think it is no more than speculation. And Al-Mubarrad said its original form is إن نحن إلا نظن ظنا. Okay, it has the same meaning. Right?
Yeah.
And we are not convinced that it will ever come.
So basically, إن نحن, so إن نظن إلا ظنا is basically dropping the dhamir, right? And shifting the إلا. So إن نحن إلا نظن ظنا versus إن نظن إلا ظنا, which again means the same.
وَبَدَا, and the evil consequence of their deeds will unfold before them in the hereafter, and they will be overwhelmed by what they used to ridicule in this life. أي جزاؤها سيئات ما عملوا. Their deeds that they committed in this life, meaning its recompense, will overwhelm them, which is the punishment. And it will be said, this day we will neglect you we will leave you in the hellfire as you neglected the meeting of this day of yours, meaning you abandoned تركتم العمل للقائه. You abandoned working towards this meeting. ومأواكم النار. Your home will be the fire, and you will have no helpers, protectors from this punishment. This is because you made a mockery of Allah's revelations, the Quran, and were deluded by your worldly life. When you said there is no resurrection or accountability, فَالْيَوْمَ لَا يُخْرَجُونَ or فَالْيَوْمَ لَا يَخْرُجُونَ. So on that day they will not be taken out of the fire, nor will they be allowed nor will they be given the chance to make amends, meaning they will not be asked to please their Lord by repenting and obedience, because it will not benefit them on that day. So all praise is for Allah, all beautiful descriptions for fulfilling His promise with the people who reject. The Lord of the heavens and the Lord of the earth, Lord of all worlds, the creator of what was mentioned. And alam is everything other than Allah, and it was made plural because of its different types.
Yeah.
And Rabbi is the badal, and to him belongs all majesty, greatness in the heavens and the earth, which is the hal, meaning every creation in both of them. And He is the Almighty, all-wise.
Jazakallah. So this وَالْعَالَمُ مَا سِوَى اللَّهِ is, applicable obviously from Fatiha onward. Rabbil Alameen, everything other than Himself. Yeah. Okay. Let's get started with the Nahu. Just 6 pages left total, and I mentioned that the remainder of the mansubat are the easy ones, but within the la li nafi al-jins, there are some additional details that we're gonna look at, right? And Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So page 136, منصوبات تفصيل خبر كان وأخواتها. فصل خبر كان وأخواتها وأخواتها والمسند بعد دخولها نحو كان زيد قائما وحكمه كحكم خبر المبتدأ، إلا أنه يجوز تقديمه على أسمائها مع كونه معرفة بخلاف خبر المبتدأ نحو كان القائم زيد. So this would be number 9 of the mansubat. The khabar of kana, the ism of kana is marfu', and the khabar of kana is mansub. It is the musnad after kana and its sisters enter upon it. So musnad ilay, right? So it becomes kana zaydun qa'iman. So if you remember how Tuhfa had phrased it, you basically have a mubtada khabar sentence that can be changed in 3 ways. Number 1, you have kana wa akhawatiha enter it, in which case the mubtada remains marfu', or the way Tuhfa explained it, the marfu' of mubtada is removed and the marfu' of kana is added, and the khabar becomes mansub. And then your mubtada khabar can have inna wa akhawatiha before it. Inna wa akhawatiha simply means that inna causes the mubtada to become the ism of inna and mansub, and the khabar of inna, becomes the khabar of inna, and it remains marfu. And the third one was third one, if I'm not mistaken, was the mubtada khabar becomes a fi'l and a fa'il, right? But the point is that it all starts off as a mubtada and khabar, and then when you have kana wa akhawatuha added, then it takes on other rulings and the khabar becomes mansub. And the hukam of the khabar of the mubtada, the hukam of the khabar of the hukam of the khabar of kana is like the hukam of the khabar of the mubtada. In other words, it's exactly the same. And the one difference is that illa, the one difference between the rules of the khabar of the mubtada and the rules of the khabar of kana, the one difference is that this one cannot be bought before its ism, all right? This one can be bought before its ism, despite it being ma'rifah, as opposed to the khabar of mubtada. So for example, if your khabar of kana has an alif lam and it is ma'rifah, then you can bring it before the ism of kana and it'll be kana al-qa'ima zaydun. But you cannot do the same for a normal mubtada khabar sentence. You cannot say al-qa'imu zaydun, for example, right? So if you look at the footnotes, right, it says overall, the rules of khabar of kana are very similar to the rules of the khabar of a normal mubtada. However, the one difference is that the mubtada and the khabar, if both are ma'rifah, it's not permissible to bring the khabar before the mubtada, but this is not necessary for the khabar of kana. Rather, if the khabar of kana and the ism of kana both are ma'rifah, it is permissible to bring the khabar of kana before the ism of kana. Okay. Mansubat number 10. تفصيل اسم إن وأخواتها فصل اسم إن وأخواتها هو المسند إليه. It is the musnad ilay, because musnad ilay is the mubtada and the musnad is the khabar. So the khabar of kana is going to be the musnad, and the ism of inna is going to be the musnad ilay, because it's literally the mubtada. It's now just being called the ism of inna, and it becomes that after inna or any of its sisters come before it. So example, inna zaydan qa'imun. So zaydun qa'imun, mubtada khabar, becomes inna zaydan qa'imun. That's all there is to it, right? Now, mansubat number 11 is also, so number 9, 10, 11, and 12 are basically halves of 4 that came up in the marfu'at. So in the marfu'at, you had the ism of kana, you had the khabar of inna, and then you had the ism of la li nafi al-jins, and you had the ism of ma and la that resembles laysa, right? So you have these 4 that occur, half of it in the marfu'at and half of it in the mansubat. So this is mansubat number 11, which is the la linafi al-jins. تفصيل المنصوب بلا التي لنفي الجنس فصل المنصوب بلا التي لنفي الجنس. The word that is mansub because of the la that comes to negate the genus. It is the musnad ilay, which means it is the khabar, it's the second part of the sentence, بعد دخولها, after the entry of this la. Now, this la لنفي الجنس has some conditions. شروط عمل لا التي لنفي الجنس يليها نكرة. Those are 2 conditions. يليها نكرة مضافة نحو لا غلام رجل في الدار، أو مشابها لها نحو لا 20 درهما في الكيس. Now, Let's look at the footnote 338. So there are some conditions. The three conditions for la li nafil jins, and this is the table. Number one, the ism occurs directly after the particle la. There cannot be any word in between them. That's the meaning of yaliha. It has to be near it. So you cannot have any word that comes between la and the ism of la, right? It has to be right after the other. No word in between. Nakiratan means that the ism of la li nafil jins has to be, sorry, the musnad delay we're talking about. So it's the first part of the sentence. So the ism of la has to be nakira. If the ism of la is ma'rifa, then the la does not do the amal of la li nafil jins. It's just a normal negation as opposed to an absolute negation. So that's nakiratan. And the ism of la, in addition to being nakira, has to be either mudaf or it has to be similar to a mudaf. If the ism of la is not mudaf or similar, then the la will not do amal. All right? So when you say la rajula fi dari, right? La rajula fi dari, then la is linafil jins and rajula is going to be mansub because the la is being considered as linafil jins because there's no separation between the la and the word rajul, and the word rajul is nakira. Okay. Now your ism of la linafil jins can occur in two ways. Okay. It could occur in one of two ways. And the ism of la can either be a mudaf. So this is the second table. It could either be a mudaf. So la ghulama rajulin fi dari. Or it could be similar to a mudaf, mushabih bil mudaf. La 20 dirhaman fil kisi. There are no 20 dirhams in the bag. Right? So that's mushabih bil mudaf. So simply put, when you see la rajulun fi dari, for example, or when you see the sentence la rajula fi dari, you know that it is going to be la li nafil jins because there is no separation. If any other word comes in between, then you are not going to consider it as la li nafil jins because there cannot be any separation. Okay.
Can I ask a question here, Sheikh?
Yeah.
So sometimes, yeah, la li nafil jins throws me off, but like at the end of this, can you just summarize the different forms of la and how to differentiate? So are you saying that the only two conditions for the nafil jins is that it has to follow and be nakira? So in other words, if it's ma'rifa, it's not, and if it doesn't follow, it's not nafil jins?
Yeah, right. And I mean, we're going to come across examples on the next page also where it might look similar to nafil jins, but it's not, right? And it could be for like small reasons, right? So if you want to look at the ism of la li nafil jins, then it's going to be right after the la and it's going to be nakira. So for example, you cannot say la ar-rajulu fi da. You cannot say la ar-rajula fi dari, right? You have to say la ar-rajulu fi dari, and la is going to be considered a normal negation because ar-rajulu is ma'rifa, right? So when
And you said the exception. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So when you say la rajula, it's nakira, and that is going to be considered ism of lina fil jins. Ism of la lina fil jins.
Makes sense. So is this considered an exception or just an addition of when it's mudaf? So you're saying it can also be a mudaf. So la ghulama rajulin.
So it doesn't always have to be, it can also be a mudaf, it doesn't always have to be a mudaf. So when you say لا رجل في الدار, clearly there's no idafa happening there, but we would consider لا رجل في الدار as a لنفي الجنس sentence, right? So if it occurs as a mudaf, then the same conditions has to apply to the mudaf, which is the word غلامة has to be right after the word la, and it has to be nakira. Right? Or mushabih min mudaf, right? So you're saying la ishirina, you're saying ishirina as in halatul nasab versus la ishuruna, which is halatul rafa, right? So you're not making it marfu', you're making it mansub. So حكم وقوع المفردة بعد لا التي لنفي الجنس. Now this is the explanation of a single word coming after the la. فإن كان بعد لا, if it comes after the la, نكرة مفردة. It's a nakira word and it's a singular word, meaning it's not mudaf or it's not a mushabih bil mudaf. تبنى على الفتح, it is مبني على الفتح. Right? It is مبني على الفتح. So this is like a technicality, because if you look at the answer at the bottom of the page, if a singular word, meaning a word which is neither mudaf or similar to mudaf, occurs after the particle of la li nafi al-jins, then the particle la will not do amal. Instead, the singular word will be mabni ala al-fath. Example, in the sentence la rajula fi dari, on the next page, no man is in the house. The word rajul is a singular word, hence the particle is not doing amal. The particle la is not doing amal, and rather the word rajula is regarded as mabni ala al-fath. What this simply means is that it is fatha not because of the la, it is fatha because this word that's occurring on its own and right after the la is going to be mabni ala al-fath. It's basically labels, right? Like what's doing the amal directly on this word that causes it to be mansub. But the meaning of it is still la li nafi al-jins. You're just trying to figure out which one is the amil. The amil is not the la. The amil for a singular nakira word after the la is going to be mabni ala al-fath, and that's the amil that causes it to be mansub. But in meaning, they're still the same. You translate all of them as la li nafi al-jins, right? Now, حكم وقوع المعرفة أو النكرة المفصولة بعد لا التي لنفي الجنس. Okay. So, what happens if the ism that comes after la is ma'rifah? So the rule of the ism occurring as a ma'rifah or as a nakira, but it's mafsula, it's separated from the la, because the two conditions of la li nafi al-jins ism is that it has to occur right after the la and it has to be nakira. So what happens if it's both or one of them? So وَإِن كَانَ مَعْرِفَةً, if the ism of la li nafi al-jins is ma'rifah, أو نكرة مفصولا, or it is a nakira, but it is separated. It is separated between, there's a separation between the ism of la and the la itself, where it's not supposed to be the case, because it's supposed to be right after the other. كَانَ مَرْفُوعًا. So this is the rule, that the ism is going to be marfu', which means la li nafi al-jins will not be the case there. So if the ism after la is ma'rifah, it's not la li nafi al-jins. If the ism is nakira, but there is another word in between or other words in between the la and the ism, which is nakira, then it is still going to be marfu'. It will not be the اسم of لنفي الجنس. Okay. In addition to being مرفوع ويجب تكرير لا مع اسم آخر. It is going to be necessary to repeat the la with another ism. So the la in this case cannot be for multiple things in a sentence. The la has to be repeated for everything that you want to negate, because it's not going to be like a general negation. Okay, so for example, لا زيد في الدار ولا عمرو. لا زيد في الدار ولا عمرو. So the word zaydun is ma'rifa, so it automatically becomes disqualified to be an ism of linafil jins. So it's marfu', right? And la is just a normal negation. Now, when you have the word amrun coming in the sentence as well, because you want to say Zayd is not in the house and Amr is not in the house, the la has to be repeated with that second ism. So you cannot say La Zaydun fi dari wa Amrun. La Zaydun fi dari wa Amrun. You can't say that. You have to say La Zaydun fi dari wa la Amrun. And now, the second example, La fiha rajulun wa la imra'atun. So rajul is nakira. However, there is the word fiha in between the la and this nakira ism. Therefore, the word rajul cannot be the ism of linafil jins. It is going to be marfu'. And the second ism that occurs in the sentence has to have another la with it. So you'll say la fiha rajulun wa la imra'atun instead of saying la fiha rajulun wa imra'atun. Okay. So basically, la fiha rajulun wa la imra'atun, there's no man or woman in it, meaning in the house, for example. So this next section is just like an interesting thought exercise, because you have this phrase la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah that could be read in multiple different ways. So we say la hawla wa la quwwata, and hawl and quwwa we treat it as la linafil jins, but there's a repetition of la. We say la hawla wa la quwwata, right? So there's this interesting thought exercise here with regards to like different possibilities given its makeup, right? So we're just going to read through it, but we're not going to look at it too deeply, right? And it falls under la linafil jins. So تفصيل لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. So ويجوز في مثل لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله خمسة أوجه. So let's read through the footnotes for this. 46, 47, 48. So there the five scenarios mentioned for reading La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah are not restricted to the sentence, but any sentences similar will have the same rule. In this context, what we mean by similar sentences are sentences where the la is repeated, and after both the la, there is a nakira noun, which is occurring as the ism. And after both the la, there should be no separation between the la and the ism. So the thought exercise is this. The rule says that la and the ism of la cannot have any separation. And if they do have a separation, then the ism, which is nakira, is still going to be marfu', right? La fiha rajulun wa la imra'atun, and the la will be repeated. Now, which means if there is no separation and if there's no nakira, so this is the hypothetical scenario where we do have actual examples. You have la and you have the ism of la after itself, which is nakira. There is no separation between the two. However, the sentence itself repeats the la with another ism, which is not necessary, because when you have, no separation and your ism is nakira, then there's no need to repeat the la. But this example is where the la is repeated and there's a nakira noun occurring right after the la, and there's no separation between the ism and la. So this is like this in-between category. And la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah is the most common and most immediately understood example. So when you have something like this, khamsatu awjuhin, you could read it technically or grammatically in 5 ways. Okay? So another example besides la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah that's given is on page 139 footnote right above 347. The 5 scenarios will apply to the sentence like la rajula fi dari wa la imra'ata. Right? La rajula fi dari wa la imra'ata. That's also a sentence that fulfills the same type of conditions. Now, what is the full meaning of the sentence La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah? So what you are saying actually is La ruju'a lana 'anil ma'asi wa la quwwata lana 'ala ta'ati illa bi'ismatihi wa tawfiqihi. Right? So when you say La hawla wa la quwwata, right, there is no protection or no turning away and no strength except for Allah. You mean it as specifically no turning for us from sins and no power, ability to do good except with what Allah gives, right? So there are 5 ways to read this sentence, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So going through the table itself, the first one is the one that we usually say, La hawla wa la quwwata. Both hawl and quwwa basically have a fatha, and the la before itself is the la li nafil jins. The la before itself is the la li nafil jins. So this thought exercise basically shows how, because of like this mixing of the rules, you could have you could have both parts of the sentence be la li nafil jins. You could have both parts of the sentence be normal negation, or you could have one part of the sentence be negation and one part of the sentence be la li nafil jins. All right? And that's what we're going to look at. The second example, or the second variation, la hawlun wa la quwwatun illa billah. How is that possible? La hawlun wa la quwwatun, because hawl and quwwa are both nakira and they're occurring after la. Why aren't they mansub? Well, hawl is going to have a double dhamma because the la before hawlun is in the meaning of laysa. Is la bima'na laysa, and therefore it will not do any amal like the la li nafil jins, and this hawlun is going to occur as a normal mubtada. Right? So this la is not in the meaning of jins, it's in the meaning of laysa, and the ism of laysa is going to be in the state of rafa. Quwwa will also have a double dhamma because the la before it is in the meaning of laysa, therefore it won't do any amal, and the ism of laysa is going to be also marfu'. So you say la hawlun wa la quwwatun illa billah. Variation number 3, la hawla wa la quwwatan illa billah. Now the first hawl, the hawl, is going to have one fatha because the la is occurring as a linafil jins. La hawla. La hawla, it's occurring as a nafil jins. However, quwwatan will have a double fatha because the la before it is extra. And the word quwwa is doing atf upon the word hawl. Therefore, it's in halatul nasab. Okay, so it's in halatul nasab because it is connected to hawl. So you could literally say la hawla wa quwwata illa billah. La hawla wa quwwata illa billah. But because the la is being repeated, the quwwa is just atf, and it takes on the halat al-nasab and it becomes quwwatan. Footnote number, variation number 4, la hawla wa la quwwatun illa billah. So hawl is the ism of la linafil jins, the la is occurring as a linafil jins, but quwwatun has a double dhamma because the la before it is extra, and therefore quwwatun is now regarded as a mubtada. It's another sentence. So la hawla is a la linafil jins with an ism of linafil jins. Wa la quwwatun illa billah is considered as a mubtada khabar sentence that can become the khabar of the la linafil jins. So wa la quwwatun illa billah is like a mubtada khabar sentence in and of itself, right? So quwwatun is regarded as a mubtada. The last one is la hawlun wa la quwwata illa billah. So it's a reversal of number 4, right? That the first word hawl has the double dhamma, and in this case it has the double dhamma because the la is acting as the meaning of in the meaning of laysa. Therefore the ism of laysa is going to have marfu'. Wala quwwata has a single fatha because the la before it is linafil jins. So if you kind of just look through why the changes occur and why the i'rabs change, you can kind of see all the different rules coming together, right? But generally speaking, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah is considered linafil jins. But the thought exercise is that you can have phrases like this, and what do you do when it happens? Well, you're not restricted to just one option because the las and the ism of the las that come after them can be for different reasons, right? And can be something different. Okay. وَقَدْ يُحْذَفُ اسْمُ لَا لِقَرِينَةٍ. So the ism of la linafil jins can be dropped for a reason. For example, la alayka is actually la basa alayka, right? La basa alayka, kind of like no problem. So you just say la alayka, right? Okay. The last of the mansubat is number 12, and this is tafsilu khabru ma wala al-mushabbahatayn bilaysa. So the ism of ma and la that resembles laysa is part of the marfu'at. So it's a ma and la that's not just a normal negation, because ma and la are particles of negation, but they specifically come in the meaning of laysa, which is also for negation. But the point is that laysa as one of the af'al naqisa requires its ism to be marfu' and its khabar to be mansub. So the ma and la that comes in the meaning of laysa is also going to require its ism to be marfu' and its khabar to be mansub. So faslun khabru ma wa la al-mushabbahatayn bilaysa. Huwa al-musnad, because the khabar is the musnad. These are the musnads after ma and la enter upon the sentence. For example, ma zaydun qa'iman and la rajulun hadiran. Okay. So zaydun qa'imun, that's a normal mubtada khabar. When you say ma zaydun qa'imun, Zayd is not standing, that's a normal mubtada khabar sentence that's being negated. Ma zaydun qa'imun. So how do you know if a ma is coming in the meaning of laysa or it's just a normal ma? Because there will be a difference in the i'rab of the second word. Because if it's in the meaning of laysa, it'll be ma zaydun qa'iman. And if it's not in the meaning of, laysa, then it'll remain qa'imun and it'll be ma zaydun qa'imun. Another example, la rajulun hadiran. All right. So the scenarios are mentioned here. الصور التي لم يعمل ما ولا المشبهتين بليس. The scenarios where ma and la do not resemble laysa, or basically they don't come in the meaning of laysa, and therefore they don't give the i'rab of laysa. Number one, وَإِنْ وَقَعَ الْخَبْرُ بَعْدَ إِلَّا. If the khabar occurs after the word illa, example, ma zaydun illa qa'imun, then this ma is going to be just a normal ma, not in the meaning of laysa. أو تقدم الخبر على الاسم. Or if the khabar is brought forward or brought before the ism. For example, ma qa'imun zaydun. You're not going to say ma qa'iman zaydun, but rather ma qa'imun zaydun. أو زيدت in بعد ما. Or the word in is added after the word ma. Example, ma in zaydun qa'imun. Ma in zaydun qa'imun. So if it was just ma zaydun, it'll be ma zaydun qa'imun or ma zaydun qa'iman. Okay. So basically the entire sentence is read as وَإِنْ وَقَعَ الْخَبْرُ بَعْدَ إِلَّا أَوْ تُقَدِّمَ الْخَبْرَ عَلَى الْإِسْمِ أَوْ زِيدَتْ إِنْ بَعْدَ مَا بَطَلَ الْعَمَلِ. Then the amal of laysa will not happen. كَمَا رَأَيْتَ فِي الْأَمْثِلَةِ, as we have seen in the examples. Now, this last one is just an extension, sort of. عمل ما ولاء المشبهتين بليس عند أهل الحجاز دون بني تميم. Because again, grammatically, when you are trying to come up with rules or you're trying to understand the usage of certain rules, you're going to have different dialects to choose from. So Banu Tamim, Banu Hijaz, Quraysh, so on and so forth. These are some of the dialects that are the most well known. And more often than not, you might have some difference in how one tribe used a particular rule versus another. So here, the amal of ma and la that resembles laysa is only according to the people of the Hijaz. In other words, the ma and la that comes in the meaning of laysa will make its khabar mansub only according to Ahl al-Hijaz, but not the Banu Tamim. وَهَذَا لُغَةُ أَهْلِ الْحِجَازِ. This is the lugha of the people of Hijaz. أَمَّا بَنُو تَمِيمٍ. As for Banu Tamim, فَلَا يَعْمَلُونَهُمَا أَصْلًا. Ma and la do not actually do amal on the khabar. Ma and la do not do khabar, do not do amal on the khabar of them, even if it comes in the meaning of laysa. كقول الشاعر عن لسان بني تميم. And they use the example of a poet from the Banu Tamim who says وَمُحَفَّفٍ كَالْغُصْنِ قُلْتُ لَهُ انتسب فَأَجَابَ مَا قَتْلُ الْمُحِبِّ حَرَامٌ. So the ma in the second sentence is not in the meaning of laysa, or even if it is in the meaning of laysa, then the word haramun, which is the khabar of ma, is supposed to be mansub, but the word haram is bi raf'in. So bi raf'i haramun. The word haram is in rafa because according to them, ma in the meaning of laysa does not have the same type of effect like the people of Hijaz. The translation of the poem is, and the person with thin hips like a branch, I said to him, mention your lineage. he gave the answer that killing a beloved is not forbidden upon the lover. I have no idea what that means. That's fine. The shu'ara, are the shu'ara. The point of this example is to simply see the word haram in halat al-rafa, and that's because the Banu Tamim don't have this rule. I'm sure there's some explanation of why he gave that answer. And that's it. That's the end of the Mansubat chapter. And the Majrurat chapter is literally just 9 pages. So inshallah, we'll do this after the break. And as I mentioned, the goal will be to start the khatima of the Tawabi', which obviously we've done in Tuhfa as like Mawsul Sifa, Atf Ma'tuf, Ta'keed, Badal, all of those things are going to come up in the Khatima fi Tawabi', and that is going to be up until page 170. Right. So we have about 30-ish pages, inshallah, to do after the break, before winter break, inshallah. And we finished juz number 25 today. Finished juz number 25 today. So we're not going to try to finish the juz by winter break, but we'll try to do at least half of it, inshallah, so that we have about 4.5 left for spring. Any questions? All right. Jazakallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.